Good evening, esteemed and honorable members of council, Chief of Staff Simmons, Deputy Chief of Staff Mergler, department heads, Office of Management and Budget, Finance Director Taylor, and members of the public. Today is Monday, April the 7th, and I would like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting. This evening, there are two budget hearings scheduled, revenue projections followed by the Finance Department. At this time, I would first like to start by recognizing members of the Finance Committee that are in attendance this evening by doing a roll call. Council members Darby. Hackett.
Here.
Oliver. Brazy. Spadola. President Congo. I would also like to recognize any other council members. Council members Owens, Cabrera, Willard,
Here.
Johnson, Field,
Here.
McCoy. Thank you, council members. Mayor Carney.
Councilmember Owens here. Sorry.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Owens. Mayor Carney presented a proposed budget to council on March the 20th. This budget, as proposed, includes the following: a 0% property tax rate increase, a 6.5 water sewer rate increase, along with a 6% stormwater rate increase, and a $2.5 million transfer from the Tax Stabilization Fund to the Neighborhood Stabilization Fund to fund the following: $500,000 for the Wilmington Neighborhood Conservancy Land Bank, $2 million for the Home Repair Program, and $0 used from the fund balance. The proposed general fund budget totaled $201 million, up $7.6 million. The proposed water sewer fund budget totaled $95 million, up $5.2 million. The proposed capital budget totaled $199 million. The proposed general fund budget has a budgeted surplus of $2.8 million and factors two main items that will warrant much discussion during these proceedings. $4 million for EMS, the ambulance service, which will add 30 new EMS positions, one new civilian position, and other relevant costs. The property tax assessment. This is a result of a court mandate that's within the purview of Newcastle County, who authorized Tyler Technologies to perform a property tax reassessment based on market rate value, which is revenue neutral. This may cause an increase in some residential customers' property taxes, and there may be a shift with more commercial properties paying lower property taxes. I look forward to working with the mayor and my colleagues to learn more on the plans for how the mayor intends to establish a fund or to offer some financial assistance. The water sewer rates. While the fiscal year 26 proposed water rates submitted to council from the mayor are lower than the recommendations by UCAB, Utility Citizens Advisory Board, this council must review these proposed rates as well as understanding the impact of other rising costs such as Delmarva bills, property taxes due to the reassessment, and likewise water sewer rates. The mayor has shared his vision for the intended planned use of the fiscal year 2026 proposed budgetary funds. Now it is council's fiduciary responsibility to review the budget, have budget hearings with the various departments to get a complete plan on the intended use of these budgetary funds, and then to have negotiations with the administration on any changes that may be warranted to this proposed budget. By charter, council must adopt a balanced budget, and it shall be the duty of the council at least 30 days before the end of this fiscal year to adopt the annual operating ordinance for the next fiscal year. Council has shared its priorities as well with the mayor, which are inclusive of public safety, a police accountability review board, a recruitment and retention officer for Wilmington Fire Department, and partners and care, a neighborhood stabilization plan, funding for the home repair program, affordable housing and revitalization, and property tax reassessment inequities. The community, a citywide beautification program for each district, and the Juneteenth celebration. Regarding education, HBCU funding specifically for City of Wilmington residents only, as well as the Office of Educational Advocacy. This is new. Economic development, we will continue with the Small Minority Business Program. Financial stability for the Water Assistance Program. And lastly, renovations for our parks, just to name a few. Also, ensuring that council's legislative mandates are adequately funded. Before I turn it over to Mr. Winkler, Deputy OMB Director, for presenting the fiscal year 2026 revenue projections, I would like to inform everyone that public comments will be made at the end of each department's budget hearing, and we look forward to having participation from the public. Public comments is limited to 3 minutes. If there is any follow-up information during any of the budget hearings, Ms. Bassnight will track and follow up on those requests. The budget hearings are limited due to time constraints. I kindly ask if all can be mindful and respectful of time. All budget questions should be of a fiscal budgetary manner only and will be limited based upon time limitations. I ask if my colleagues have any questions later, please raise your hand. It is intended for each department to present, then questions will be slated afterwards. Mr. Winkler, I now turn it over to you for presenting the fiscal year 2026 revenue budgets, then projections, then followed questions at the end of the presentation, as well as welcoming your team, Mr. Rob Greco, OMB Director, and Mr. Brett Taylor, Finance Director. This hearing is tentatively slated 90 minutes. All counsel was provided a letter via email from WEFAC, the Wilmington Economic Financial Advisory Committee, Chairman Chopra, which certifies that WEFAC certifies the fiscal year 2026 revenue projections. Mr. Winkler, if you can please present the fiscal year 2026 revenue projections at this time. But first, I would like to acknowledge Council Members Johnson, Cabrera, President Congo, McCoy, and Bracy. Thank you, Mr. Winkler.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, members of council. And thank you for inviting me to discuss the FY 2026 revenue projections. Today I'll be going into detail on the budgeted revenues for the general fund, and I'll also be giving a brief overview of the revenues for the water sewer fund. All right, if we could get the next slide. Great. Okay, so let's start off with the general fund. So for FY26, the projected general fund budget prior to transfers is $204.2 million, which is up $8.3 million from last year's budget. Now, before I get into all the details on that, it's actually worth mentioning just a couple of things here. So first, let me explain to you what you're actually seeing on these tables up at the top. On the left, you can see the total revenue budget for the general fund. That's that 204 million, along with two changes underneath that. So the first change you're seeing there, the up 8.3 million, that's the change from FY25's budgeted revenues. Now, because the FY25 revenues are actually coming in a bit better than the budget, we also show a second change here. That's that FY25 projected change of 4.9 million. That's the change from the projection that we've given to WEFAC, the Wilmington Economic, Financial, and Advisory Council, during their Q2 meeting. So you'll hear me call that the WEFAC projection or the Q2 projection, when I actually discuss the individual revenues. And then up on the top right, I've got the last 5 years of actuals in blue, and then the projected and budgeted revenues in orange. All right, so I also do want to go a little bit into the background on how we actually make these projections. So the revenues that I'm going to show you here were developed with by the Office of Management and Budget in coordination with the Finance Department and other city staff. The projections that we come up with are then presented to WEFAC, which reviews and advises on those projections and then confirms that they sort of accurately represent the city's revenues for the next fiscal year. So like you said, for 26, WEFAC approved the revenues when they met on March 27th. Now, once those revenues are approved by WEFAC, the revenue projection can't be changed by OMB or the mayor's office without further WEFAC review. And beyond that, by city code, council can't change the revenue projections. All right, so given all of that about how we make the projections themselves. So one major point, and I believe it's already been made here, is that there's no use of the tax stabilization reserve this year to balance the budget. The revenues that we're projecting are sufficient to cover the budgeted general fund expenditures of a little under 202 million. And second, and this is a pretty big point, the projection that we've made does not assume that the economy is going to go into recession in 2026 or there's going to be any other major macroeconomic changes in the broader economy, other than those things that I'm going to discuss. There's some changes to interest rates and DFAC growth rates that I'll bring up when we get into the individual items. So, obviously, it's a very dynamic time right now for economic policy. We've seen the tariffs over the last few days. We've seen a lot of other changes that have happened in the last few weeks. And everyone's expecting that's going to have some impact on inflation, growth, interest rates, employment, everything, all those things that make up the economy. But trying to quantify those in this projection, given that the effects of all of those policies could be really varied, sometimes contradictory, is a bit beyond what we can really do in a projection like this. And it's tough to do given how fast some of those things are changing at the federal level. What we've tried to do here is attempt to be conservative and realistic and give you a baseline projection, while at the same time still really being clear-eyed about the risks that are ahead of us. So think of this as the baseline, and you build from that when anything else changes.
Okay. Well, I just want to ask one question.
Sure.
Is that the reason between the big difference between what's projected and budgeted?
So far, not really. Between projected and budgeted, that would be what we projected in 25. So we actually have some improvement between what we originally projected in 25 and what's coming in. And that's been seen for a variety of reasons over the last year. Actually, we'll get into a few of those and some of the major ones. The biggest one really is the wage tax. That we've seen some improvement on that. But I will get into some of those details when we actually hit that item.
Okay, great.
All right, if I could get the next slide. All right, so what you've got here is the breakout of the city's general fund revenue. And our largest source, as you can obviously see there, is wage and net profits at over 41%. Second largest is property tax. Now, what that really makes obvious when you see this pie is the degree to which the majority of our revenues aren't directly controlled by the city. Of the biggest two that you have here, the only one we can actually control is the property tax rate, because the wage tax rate is set by the Delaware General Assembly. Similarly, all the next largest revenues are all the state transfers, the county seat relief, task force. if you exclude interest, the city can really only control about 39% of its revenues. And if you take out the property tax, there's only 17% left there that we can actually control. So limited levers that the city can pull to actually bring in more revenue.
Correct.
All right,
And can
next
you just
slide.
mention?
Oh, yes, please.
What is the wage tax per employee,
The wage tax per employee?
the percentage?
Oh, 1.25.
Okay, just wanted to
Yep.
point that out, 1.25.
Which, next slide, which we are actually about to get to. So wage and net profits taxes. So wage and net profits together at 84 million, it's the largest of the city's revenue sources. So for FY26, we're projecting that these are going to go up by a little under 6.7 million relative to last year's budget. Now, the biggest chunk of these two is wage tax at 75 million, which is up about 7 million, or 10% from last year's budget. And it's up about 5.6% from the Q2 WEFAC projection. Now, the single biggest driver here, and this gets to your point about what has changed from FY25. Single biggest driver is refunds. So in the FY25 budget, we had refund losses of 3.9 million, so almost pushing 4 million, which was pretty consistent with some of those large reductions we saw post-COVID. Now, fortunately, we've seen that number start to come down in FY25, driven very likely by employers implementing return to office plans. So as people have come back, we've started to get that wage tax revenue.
That's good.
Now, because of this, we're projecting those are going to be down in 25 to about 2 million. And we expect that to continue forward into 26 as well. Now, on top of that, DFAC, the Delaware Economic Financial Advisory Council, projects that there will be wage tax growth of about 4.5%, which is what we've modeled in for our wage tax growth. That gets us an additional 3.2 million. Now, on the net profit side, we've also seen very strong revenues here with FY23 and FY24, both hitting over 9 million. Now, we don't really see much of the net profit revenue until we hit Q3. Generally, that doesn't come in until a little bit later in the year. So as of yet, we don't really have complete data for 25, though the little bit of data we have seen suggests this may be slowing slightly from what we saw in prior years. Because of that, we've pulled back 25 a little bit, $300,000 down compared to what we saw last year.
I just wanted to say for the record, the reason why I had asked about the wage tax per employee for our audience, because we talked about just the combined number of the 41.1. So I just wanted to say that for the record. And I also want to acknowledge Councilmember Spadola. You can proceed.
Yeah, next slide, please. All right, so property tax. So property tax is our second largest revenue at a bit more than 1/5 of the city's total revenues for the general fund. For FY26, we're projecting it to be a bit over 45 million. Now, so as everybody here is aware, Newcastle County performed its first total reassessment in over 40 years. Now, previously, all properties, including new ones, were assessed back to values that were 1983 equivalents. Now, obviously, there's been some pretty dramatic changes from 1983 to now. Lots happened in the city and county over the last 40 years, which meant that those 83 assessments didn't necessarily reflect what a property's current market values were. And the intention of the assessment was to reflect that. Now, we don't have finalized data from the assessment since it's not expected until later this month, which is mainly due to that extension of the appeals deadline. However, the current data we have from the county gives us a total assessed value of all the property in the city of 13.3 billion, and 9.9 billion after you take out all the exempt properties. Now, compared to the old 83 base, that's about 4.6 times larger. Now, what that doesn't mean, it's not that our taxes are going to go up 4.6 times. The actual tax bill that is paid by a property owner, that's equivalent to the assessment, which is what the county sets, times the rate, which is what the city sets. So the administration's proposed a new rate which will keep overall tax bill, or tax revenue, billed tax revenue, let me correct that, the same as FY25. So meaning that exclusive of any other changes, and there's a few changes to exemptions, which I'll get back to in a moment, there's no increase or decrease in total tax revenue as a result of the assessment. So the proposed rate for this year is 4.5577 mils, which is equal to roughly $4.56 for every $1,000 of assessed value. This will give us a projected base billing of $45.3 million, which is the same as what was billed in FY25. And by the way, you can't really directly compare that to what we had in 25. The old rate was something like 21.15 mils, but the bases are so different, they're not really directly comparable. The important sort of takeaway from all of this is that the new rate gets you the same billings as the old rate. So if you're looking to determine what your new bill is, you take your new assessment, divide it by 1,000, and then multiply by 4.5577. Now, while that total bill is going to stay the same, the total bill, individual bills might go up, might go down based on the property's assessed value. And what we've seen in analyzing the data from the county is that broadly, residential properties are now making up a bigger proportion of the city's tax base compared to commercial properties. What that means is that even with unchanged total billings, residential taxpayers are now a larger share of the total bill. And compared to the 83 assessments, meaning those old assessments we used last year, both residential and commercial values did grow, but overall, commercial grew slower. So commercial grew by a factor of 3.2, while residential grew by a factor of 5.7.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to comment there. I'm assuming that post-pandemic, the residential homes seem to have been booming, whereas the commercial, with employees working from home, vacant buildings, et cetera, has a lot to do with these, how they decided like what went up and what went down, commercial going down and residential going up, because I know there was like a big boom with residential housing post-pandemic.
Yeah, we agree. That is absolutely a driver of why you've seen this swing away from commercial. So, post-COVID, a lot of cities have seen, declines in office occupancy, driven by that work from home. And we've actually seen some properties, even before this reassessment, start to have declines in their value. Not just not growing as fast, but being reassessed downward. So I think that is definitely one of the drivers here. At the same time, we are currently working to determine, the accuracy of those assessments themselves and whether there's anything systemically inaccurate there. That's still a work in progress right now, so we'll have to get back to you once we have complete data and we're able to sort that out. But that is something that needs to be looked into on our side.
Right.
Now, given all of that, the result for the median homeowner, and by the median homeowner, I mean someone who owns a property worth $210,000 in assessed value. That median homeowner will see a $216 annual increase. Now, obviously that's the median value. So, some property owners are going to see their bills go up, and some are going to see their bills go down based on whatever their new assessed value is. Now, as the mayor mentioned in his budget address, and I believe there's been quite a bit of discussion about, the administration is currently looking into potential programs to assist certain payers, who may have seen their bills go up. And again, to be clear, we're still analyzing all that data to determine what that's going to look like. So I can't really give you a whole lot of details right now, but we will get back to you once we have some finalized plans available. All right, next slide. All right, so given all of that, what does that actually mean for the budget? First thing, there's no change in the base billings because we're keeping that level. But as you may have noticed up at the top, those numbers are negative. They're in the red. We're down compared to FY25. The biggest driver of that is there was roughly $500,000 in additional exemptions, which came off the 25 property tax billing, but those weren't included in the 25 budget. So you can see that happening in that $400,000 down in the FY25 projection there. And on top of that, we expect there's going to be some additional new nonprofit exemptions, a little under $200,000 that are going to take effect in 26 for a total reduction of almost $700,000 budget to budget. And we're also expecting that the penalty and interest revenues will be down about $200,000, which is consistent with what we've seen historically. All right, next slide. Okay, other taxes. So other taxes includes franchise fees, head taxes, real estate transfer taxes. And those real estate transfer taxes, those are taxes on the sales of properties in the city. Collectively, we're projecting these to be about $1.8 million up relative to the 25 budget. On the head tax side, we're projecting an increase of almost $400,000. This is mainly due to a major employer that's now resumed paying head taxes after several years of non-payment. Though there are a few offsets that are built in there as well, since we, over the long run, have seen head tax slowly decline about 5.6% a year. So that's built into that. Now, on the real estate transfer side, we've seen very good growth, both on the residential transfers and the commercial transfers. On the residential, so meaning sales of houses versus commercial properties. On that residential side, we've seen strong revenues in 24 and 25, hitting about 3.7 in 25, which is actually probably conservative. It looks like it'll likely hit higher than that. And for 26, where our model assumes some modest housing price growth, declines in mortgage rates, and then we've taken that down a standard deviation. So we're being extra conservative on this because this can swing due to a lot of effects in the economy. The effect we get is about 3.8 million, which is 700-some thousand up from last year's budget and about 100,000 up from the WEFAC projection. Now, similar to that on the commercial side, we're projecting that we will be up about $600,000. This matches what we've seen in FY23, 4, and 5, where we've hit about 1.7 million a year. So we're reflecting that new baseline that we're seeing here. So that's all good news. And then finally, we expect the franchise fees that we get from Delmarva to be flat, based on what we've seen so far this year. All right, next slide. Okay, licenses, permits, and fees. We're projecting this to be 3.1 million budget to budget. So the single biggest component of licenses, permits, and fees is permits. These are up about 465,000, driven by some very strong building and demolition permits that we've seen this year and we expect to carry forward. Business licenses, on the other hand, those are flat in 25. They're flat compared to 25, but they're a little bit up relative to the budget, 78,000, due to some stronger property maintenance, fire inspection, cut fees. And then finally, we have EMS. So now that we're bringing EMS in-house, the city is going to need to start billing for ambulance services. Now, assuming that the city sees utilization levels that are similar to what Trinity Health has seen, it's possible that in the future we could eventually receive EMS medical insurance fee revenues of somewhere between 3 to 4 million. But that's in the future once we have everything up and running. So for 26, we're being a bit more conservative on our estimate, given that there can be a lot of reasons that there would be delays in collecting that EMS insurance revenue. In particular, the city needs to become certified with various insurers. So we need to become certified with Medicare, Medicaid, the larger private insurers. Collectively, those are like 95% of the EMS insurance fee revenues. And if there's any delays in having that happen, it results in decreased revenues. And while that process is underway, the projection here just builds assumptions for delays in here just to be safe. So for that first year, we've reduced this down to $2.5 million. And again, that's because there are just unknowns that could happen in that first year when you start to do EMS billing. And again, that's likely conservative, but until we have some more experience on that, we think this is a good risk-averse approach. And then, obviously, we'll talk a bit more about that at the fire budget hearing on April 24th.
Okay.
Okay, next category, fines. All right, so fines, which has criminal fines, instant ticketing, red light, parking, it's down just slightly from the 25 budget. Single biggest thing here is red light revenues, which are down about $300,000 from the budget, but they're up $2.4 million from that Q2 WEFAC projection. So in FY25, revenues during the first half of the year are something like 70% down, which is the result of a larger than normal number of cameras being offline. Now, finance is working to make sure that those are back up and running, and we expect this to be resolved before the beginning of 26. However, losses from tickets being issued, that'll continue for the next several years because roughly half of the tickets that are issued aren't paid for a year or more. As a result of that, when you don't have a ticket paid this year, you lose revenue in subsequent years. So for 26, we expect that to be about $325,000 down. Now, on the other hand, parking revenues are trending a little bit better than, actually quite a bit better than expected, about $261,000 better. This is post those parking fine revisions that were introduced in 25. So we were likely a bit conservative on those projections then, so a bit up. And then there's some smaller fines, or smaller changes to the criminal fines and instant ticket revenues, which are in total up about $21,000. Okay, next slide. Interest. So interest, this is our earnings on investing the city's cash balances. We're projecting this to be about $3 million down relative to the 25 budget. So, as you can see on that table up at the top, during 23 and 24, when the Fed increased rates, our revenue also increased dramatically. We were only about $137,000 in FY22. You can just barely see that line in 22, all the way up to $10 million in 24. So those changes in rates helped us out quite a bit on the interest side. However, it cuts the other way. As the Fed starts to pull those rates back down in 25, we've seen our revenues go down. Not only we did, build in an assumption that rates would start to come down. The budget was built on 4.3%, and that's more or less what we've seen. The other big change here, though, is that the investable cash balances have also fallen. So we were about $181 million in Q1. We're now down to about $153 million at the beginning of Q3. And that's mainly driven by big outlays on capital projects, along with some incentive payments that the city has done. So, we're using our money. We're spending our money to do things that need to be done, but the net effect is that the cash balances get smaller. So, less money to invest. What that means is that we're down about $1 million in FY25. Now, going into 26, obviously, things are pretty, dynamic right now. Lots of stuff changing, lots of potentially counteracting risks of inflation, economic slowdown. It's making it pretty tricky to predict what the interest rates are going to be. So we've been conservative here. We're relying on data from the Federal Reserve. We're saying we're going to have a rate of about 3.3% because that's roughly what they're saying as well. So we also assume there's going to be some additional reductions in the fund balance as we spend down, on additional capital spending. Again, good things the city needs to do, but reductions to fund balance. That gets you, a net result of interest earnings of about $5.2 million. Next slide. Okay, other revenues. So, other revenues, this is sort of a catch-all category. Includes indirect costs, general government charges, rentals, a few other miscellaneous things. Combined, this is expected to be down about $188,000 relative to last year. First up, general government charges, expected to go up by $407,000. The biggest thing driving this is vacant property registrations. They're currently trending about $480,000 better than in the budget. And the second big change is indirect costs. So indirect costs, those are those charges to reimburse the general fund for the costs that it incurs in supporting the city's water, sewer, and stormwater utilities. So, for example, that includes things like accounting, HR, legal, IT, all those things that aren't directly budgeted in the water sewer fund, but support the water sewer fund. So, for FY2026, Black & Veatch, which is the city's water consultant, they performed a new citywide indirect cost allocation study. And after meeting with each department, reviewing all their operations, Black & Veatch determined that the total cost of general fund supporting services was about $8.2 million, and that's down $596,000 from last year's budget. So that change, that $596, you'll see that both as a reduction in the general fund revenue and also an equivalent reduction to water sewer fund expenses. There'll be some additional discussion on where those numbers come from, the effects of all of that, when Black & Veatch does their presentation on the water sewer plan on April 30th. Okay, task force revenues. So, task force revenues in net are projected to be up just a little under $40,000. Biggest things here are corporate filing tax, which is up $51,000. And LCC filing tax, which is up $135,000. This is matching what we see in the Q2 WEFAC projection, and then actually flat, really going into 2026, since DFAC is projecting that we're going to see these stay the same as the revenues we see in 25. Beyond that, lodging tax is up about $47,000 based on some of the historical trending we've seen. And natural gas tax is down $192, which is consistent with the revenues we've seen in both 24 and 25. Next slide. County seat relief. In total, we are up about $586,000 from last year's budget, though again, we're flat compared to the Q2 WEFAC projection. First, you get those Newcastle County corporate filing fees, up $151, and the UCC filing fees, up $451. These are really increases we're seeing in FY25, which are then flat into 26. That's consistent with those DFAC projections. So all four of the major transfers from the state in the task force revenues and the county seat relief, those are all expected to stay flat going into 26. The pilot, which is the payment in lieu of taxes. So it's a payment on what would otherwise be tax-exempt properties in the city. We're expecting that to be $3.3 million, just slightly down. That's equal to what we actually received in 25. And then finally, you've got the statutory trust payment, which is $1 million. That's its capped value. All right. So that is the general fund. Moving on to water sewer. So there's going to be an in-depth presentation on water sewer on April 30th. So I'm just going to give a pretty high-level overview right here. In total, we're projecting it to be $100.6 million, which is up $2.5 million relative to last year's budget. Now, similar to general fund, this projection has been reviewed and approved by WEFAC. Beyond that, the really big difference between the general fund and the water sewer fund, at least from a revenue perspective, is that the bulk of the water sewer fund's revenues consists of charges to water and sewer customers for the services that we actually provide. This means that unlike the general fund, the water sewer fund isn't funded by taxes. It's funded by fees to users. All right, next slide. Okay, so there, you can see in front of you, that's the breakout of the revenues in the water sewer fund. Obviously, water sewer user fees, which are those charges to users for inside, outside water, also called direct user fees. That's the single largest component of the water sewer fund. Stormwater billing, Newcastle County make up almost all of the rest. Next slide. Okay, so for FY26, the single biggest change to the water sewer fund is on the user fee side. Again, it's the largest component of the water sewer fund revenues. We're projecting it to be up 1.7 million budget to budget. Now, to begin, the base revenue from user fees, and this is independent of any rate changes, the base revenues are projected to be down a bit over $300,000 compared to last year's projection. What we base this on is consumption estimates that we get from Black & Veatch, and then we adjust those to match, historically average collection rates on the city side. Then on top of that base estimate, the budget includes the impact of a 6.5% rate increase on inside city water, inside city sewer, and outside city water users. So combined, the rate increase gives us $3.8 million in additional revenue, net of bad debt. And to put that in context, for the typical city, inside city residential customer, that's equivalent to $4.33 per month. All right, next slide. So moving on to stormwater billings. So stormwater billings are based on the stormwater property fee, which is charged to property owners in the city. This one isn't driven directly by consumption, but instead it's based on the size of the property and the characteristics of that property. So for FY26, there's a 6% budgeted rate increase to the stormwater fee. That's expected to give us $543,000 in additional revenue. And for the average customer, that's 33 cents increase per month. All right, next slide. And then finally, we have Newcastle County Sewer. So this is the revenue that the city gets from the treatment of sewage from Newcastle County. For FY26, we're expecting this to be $162,000 up from the 25 budget. This estimate's based on data from Black & Veatch and their analysis of the contract with the county. And they can go into some more detail on this, during their presentation. All right, so that's the last slide I have on water sewer. So that concludes my presentation on the 26 revenues. And obviously at this point, I am more than happy to answer any of your questions you might have on the revenue projections.
Okay. Well, thank you for that thorough presentation and the clarification that I needed on those two. So at this time, are there any questions from the council members? Council Member McCoy and then Council Member Spadola.
No, I'm sorry, I forgot. It's committee first, right?
Pardon me?
Is the committee first, finance committee first?
Yes.
Okay.
Your hand up. Yeah. Council Member Hackett.
Just for the public record, if you could, for the Wilmington Economic and Financial Advisor, can you let us know who sits on that?
Yeah, we could provide you that list.
Thank you. Well, that was more for the people.
I believe it is publicly posted online too, but we can make sure you get that.
McCoy and then Spadola.
Okay, thank you. I just, there was something on the slide that I had a question about. Vacant property registration was up, and I just wanted to know what that, why was it up? And exactly what did that mean by this government?
Yeah, let me.
I don't know where was I? I'm sorry. All right, the general government charges, vacant property
Thank
registration.
you.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, so vacant property registration, I believe that was driven by some large write-offs we saw last year. At least that we thought were going to be one time. It actually proved that those revenue, that write-off didn't have to happen, if I recall correctly. So we ended up with, and we had built that into the budget. When that didn't occur, it meant that, you know, the revenues came back in 25, and they're going to continue on into 26. So there actually wasn't much of a change in behavior. It was just a write-off that occurred only once instead of happening multiple years in a row.
Okay.
More of an accounting issue than an actual issue in the real world.
Thank you. I said, because I was just about to ask another follow-up to that, because I'm like, all right, so that, I'm sorry, may I follow?
Yes, before you go to the next question, I had written that one down too.
Okay.
And I was just curious to know if there were people reporting vacant properties as to why that number was going up.
Yeah, and again, I can go pull up those numbers for you, but I believe that was a one-time, more of an accounting issue than it
Okay.
was an actual either behavioral or revenue issue.
Got it. All
We had
right.
carried forward what appeared to be an ongoing issue, but was really just a one-time event.
Okay. All right. Councilmember McCoy.
No, I think that he gave a better explanation, going a little further into it. The other question that I had was, so I was just looking at the, it seems as though you had you underestimated or something, I guess, when it comes to your revenue from the previous year. And it actually, our revenue, we were a little bit higher. We collected a little bit more money than we thought that we were going to have. I think we thought we were going to have projected as like hold up. I think we projected like 201 or something. It came up as 204. So everything was up a little. And I just wanted to know, besides EMS that we had spoken about, was there anything else that we kind of underestimated was going to cost us more money than it actually did?
So are you talking the revenues in 25 or the revenues in 26?
I'm talking about revenues, I'm sorry, in 25. Because
Right.
we're looking at what was brought in last year compared to what we're projecting for this coming year. And I just wanted to know whether or not was there going to be any other. I realized that there is going to be a small percent for error, just a small one. But I just wanted to know whether or not, was there anything that we may have estimated that was going to cost one thing, and then we realized we probably estimated too much, you know. I was just trying to ask that question.
Right. So this is something that's actually done quarterly
Okay.
with WEFAC. So WEFAC meets every quarter, reviews the ongoing revenues for that year, and that's actually where that 25 projection comes from. So there was already a projection done in Q1 and Q2. The Q3 one's currently in the works, based on the data we have right now. But some of the big drivers on that. So this is, you know, last year's projected budget, basically what we're developing right now, compared against what is ultimately appearing to be come in. And obviously, we don't have all of that yet. We've still got another quarter left of revenue to come in. So this is a projection. It's obviously not finalized. Biggest changes here compared to what we had in last year's projection. Biggest driver by far is wage tax. And this largely has to do with those improved refunds. You know, we had seen, like I said, we'd seen those almost $4 million annually in refunds for the last few years, mainly due to work from home, and that has fallen off quite a bit. And, you know, as we've seen people come back into the city. So, you know, good news there. If you have more people in the office, you have, you know, more revenue coming in. That's your big driver right there. Another good one, and this is kind of a bright spot, is real estate transfer. That's continued to be strong. We've seen people continue to sell houses, and we've seen commercial properties sell. So that revenue has come in well. Just sort of looking through other things that are strong. Of all of them, those are the strongest. The state transfers have also looked relatively good compared to prior years. But these are the sort of things you can't necessarily predict a year in advance.
Okay.
You also attempt to be reasonably conservative. So I think we would rather have a projection that slightly under projects than over projects, and end up not having a balanced budget.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
No problem.
thank you. Councilmember Spadola?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad to come in on your last sentence there. As you say, you'd like to under-project as opposed to over-project, because I have the same philosophy. So I'm curious why you would not project for a recession in fiscal year 26. JP Morgan a couple days ago raised their odds to 60%. Goldman raised their odds to 45%, their second hike in a week. And I get a lot of that is news from literally last week. But at what point would you go back and say, hey, council, we are projecting a recession? Like, what would it take for you to do that?
Yeah, and that's a difficult question. It's a very difficult question to go, at what point do you tip over and say, we need to take those effects into account? Part of that is going to be driven by, since you look at what revenues we have that would actually be driven by a recession. So the biggest ones are going to be things like wage tax. With things like that, we're going to be looking at what DFAC does to see if DFAC starts to take down their projections. So far, when they spoke at WEFAC, because DFAC will send someone to present, or the state will send someone to present at WEFAC and talk about where their projections are going. They at the time when they understood the risks, they said, we see there's a possibility of this coming up in the future. Now again, this was literally a week ago, and the world has changed quite a bit in the last week.
Oh, it's not.
So it's a challenge to integrate things into a projection this fast when the economic environment is changing this fast and may turn around just as quickly, given how policy has been implemented at the federal level. So, part of that is going to be driven by what we're seeing in the real world. Part of it's going to be driven, following a bit of that lead of DFAC to see, them make their projections at the state level and then implement that into our projections.
So Madam Chair, may I?
Yes.
Is this something, and I'm curious I was not on council in 2020 when COVID was coming in, but how would you, and obviously COVID came out of nowhere. This not so much though.
Yeah.
Between the federal funds being withheld and tariffs, like this has been forecast for some time now. So at what point, and I guess I'm asking the same question again, but not even official numbers, but at least like on an Excel spreadsheet, is somebody in the budget office seeing, oh, wow, wage tax, if something, is somebody in the office doing that and crunching those numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we can do, risk analysis. We can certainly look at, what happens if X percent doesn't come in. And that's something we did in COVID as well. We took the budget we had and we said, well, what if blank happens? And I think that's the challenge, largely, of predicting things like this without knowing what effect, some of these economic changes are going to have on the global economy. This isn't like a regular recession where, the economy is down 3-4% year over year. Well, we can build that into our model. Right now, I don't think anyone's quite able to predict what this is going to look like. So you can do a risk analysis. You could say, if X happens, here's what this might look like. The flip side of that is you don't want to, be overly conservative. You want to be conservative, but not so conservative that we start having to cut spending. We start laying people off when we may not have had to. There's that fine balance to walk. So we try to make sure that any of the projections, when we build them in the first place, have a degree of conservatism already built into them. Pulling them back from almost being too expansive on the growth. So we make sure that there is that buffer built in.
Okay, well, thank you. So essentially your philosophy is if you don't come in over budget on revenues, on a general year, you're surprised because of how you
I would much
underproject.
rather see that we come in over budget, yeah, and have built out a model so that we come in over, than come in under.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Bass Knight has a clarifying response.
Yes, great question, Councilman Spadola. In attending the WEFAC meeting, one thing that can give us some assurances too is the WEFAC chair, Mr. Chopa, he's also on DFAC. So a lot of the challenges that they see from DFAC, they also share with WEFAC. So they bring up those same questions and anomalies. And yes, the city does project like very conservatively. It is just reassured when Mr. Chopa said it, when, you know, based upon things that they saw on the state level that we're not necessarily seeing on the city level, but could that change? I mean, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chair, could I just
Yes,
have one
follow
other?
up.
Yes. Mr. Winkler, I just want to go back to the property tax reassessment, to the slide regarding that, which is very helpful. But one of the things that's noted that the city did know is that this was supposed to be revenue neutral. And a couple times you mentioned a data file. So I just want to make sure, do we have the full final data file, or is there still further information that we're waiting to say?
Yeah, that's one of the issues we're working with right now, that we don't have the final file.
Okay.
So because the county extended their deadline for appeals, it meant that pushed that final file out until sometime this month. So once we have that final file, we'll be able to, adjust that rate to be whatever it needs to be revenue neutral. The intention is that no matter what, we are going to have a overall revenue neutral. So, but we're dependent on, getting that final file to make that decision.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Councilmember Oliver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the, when we talk about the fines, the red lights are down due to FY25 camera outages and loss in collections. Are you saying, does this mean most of the cameras are out, so we lost revenue?
Yeah, so in the first roughly half of the year, we did see quite a few cameras out. And, because of that, if they're not issuing tickets, it means that, those tickets obviously aren't getting paid. And because a lot of tickets aren't paid until subsequent years, that's why you're seeing that revenue reduction in 26. Now, I think, in terms of actually addressing this, the operations of this, the finance director may have a bit more to say on, the operational component of it rather than just the revenue component of it.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, follow-up.
Follow-up.
I guess what I'm saying is one of the other questions would be, who should be monitoring these? Because if that's a revenue for the city, and to hear that we lost this type of revenue, and we have, me, myself, I would think that someone is monitoring them cameras. This is a public safety issue, and we should be on top of that because that's a revenue for the city of Wilmington. And if anybody can answer that question, who's monitoring these cameras? Because that's a lot of money when we put all that money into putting up cameras. And now, just to see that amount, like that shouldn't be taken lightly.
Yeah, and the finance department has been looking into this for several quarters, trying to get to the bottom of what's going on here. And my understanding, and obviously. The finance director can speak further to this, because again, I can't really speak to the operations, is that everything should be restored before the end of the fiscal year.
Yes, Councilmember Oliver, just as a FYI, I know that was a broader discussion as it related to that. That was, a good point that you brought up, and it is being discussed, I think, even to the point of, I guess it's okay to say it, like considering other vendors.
Correct.
So I was just wanting to point that out.
Yeah, I believe there's actually going to be some discussion about that in the following budget hearing.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to let her know. You have a follow-up, Councilmember Oliver?
Sure, thank you. Now, my next question, so Ms. Bass Knight, you'll send us something as far as following up on a question.
Yes, and Chair, could I respond? And,
Yes.
And just so you know, it is part of the written questions for the finance that's coming up next.
Okay.
Yes.
Another question is, I see where we're talking about other taxes, and it says Delmarva electric franchise fees unchanged. I was just wondering, I mean, I know when I read it, I understand what it means, but, I mean, that's a little weird when everyone's talking about their supplies and delivering fee being increased. So the franchise fees have not been.
So you're not wrong. We did see a one-time spike, but it basically came back to levels that didn't really move the total that much. The rest of it, at least prior to that, and looking like going forward, isn't all that different from what we've seen in prior years. You do tend to get increases around those months as things get expensive, but it looks like this is a one-time hit rather than an ongoing increase in the revenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, that's all.
You're welcome. Councilmember Hackett and then Owens.
If it's okay, you probably got a follow-up on this subject? Okay. I just want to go back to the property tax assessment real quick, and I just want to ask, I think Ms. Marshall stated, we talked about the final data, so does that mean that this rate can change?
Yes, yeah. So, again, the intention is to keep the total flat. So, we're not raising overall taxes based on whatever the total assessed value is. But we need to see that final number. So this is based on the current data that we have.
Can I get a follow-up?
Yes.
And I guess, we're here to speak on, some of the little people out here in the community, and just trying to figure out, it's a lot that talks about the median homeowner and assessed value, but is there any data for commercial so that we could be able to see, like, what would they be paying as well? I think a lot of this presentation has been about homeowners, but, the commercial properties is dropping, so we possibly need to see how much they're paying or how much that's going to drop. Compared to now, the rate might change, and then again, now we got homeowners that's going to come back and say, hey, listen, I got to pay an increased amount again. So there's a lot of people in our community today that's constantly coming to us saying, hey, listen, my property's assessed at this value, no way it's this value, and now I'm about to get hit with this larger bill. And now I'm hearing now that the rate might change, so the bill might go up or it might go down. I'm not sure at all on that, but I'm just trying to figure out, you guys came up with a rate, but was it just to make sure that it was just revenue neutral?
It's revenue neutral across the board. So you sum up all the values of the properties and you use that to match to last year. So it's not revenue neutral, property by property, which again means some go up, some go down. And by categories, you're going to have different amounts. And that's going to be driven by what we were talking about earlier, that those commercial values in total, they're 3 and a bit times higher. The residential are 5.7 times higher. Yeah. So yeah, that is going to make that residential a bigger chunk of the total properties that are out there.
I'm pretty sure she got a follow-up.
Councilmember Owens and then Councilmember Willard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a follow-up to what Councilwoman Oliver was saying about the franchise fees for Delmarva Power. Mm-hmm. So currently we have that set at 2%, and it's been at that level for, I'm guessing, the FY24 and the FY25 years?
Yeah, there's been no change in the rate.
Okay. Is there a reason why there's been no change, seeing that in our under other revenues, we're projecting a 1.8% decrease in the change from FY26 and FY25, which would result in about a $188,000 difference?
So, that one, since the rate is unchanged, it's really driven by activity and market prices. So, if electricity is more or less, then, we're going to get paid more or less. Unfortunately, it's not something we can directly control.
Can I offer follow up, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So we only get paid based off of what the actual electricity delivery or the electricity side of it is, not the delivery fees that they add on, correct?
I'm actually not sure. Yeah, we could look into that for you.
Okay. And the only reason I say that is because we have seen an increase from Delmarva, who is a sole provider to most of the city of Wilmington, if not all. So therefore, if they have a monopoly on the city of Wilmington, and we're seeing huge increases on their end, I believe that it would be within good reason for the city to also increase that 2% tax to bring in additional revenue and give some relief from other taxes from the city residents who are already paying more in their Delmarva bills.
Yeah, and we'd have to see whether we actually have the ability to change that rate.
Okay.
I believe that may have been set by the state, but we can
Gotcha.
confirm that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councilmember Willard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the budget and the revenue and how the revenue, again, just thinking about the city residents, people are under a lot of financial pressure, like their own personal budgets. A lot of people are under that, talking about Delmarva, but also Councilman Spadola brought up just, the turmoil in the economy. So everybody's worried about their, personal budgets. And so I guess my question, revenue for the city, a lot of it, translates for the people we represent into what they're paying. So it's revenue, it's the city's revenue, but it's an expense for the resident. So I just wanted to make sure that the budget is making sure that the expenses for residents are, it's focused, it's fair, basically. And there's a few different places where I see expenses for residents that, people sometimes have questions about the fairness. So one of them is the indirect costs. I know that the indirect costs are charges that the city puts onto the water sewer fund. It's about 8 million. I know it's down a little bit from before, but that's 8 million in indirect costs over and above paying for the finance department. So when people pay the water bill, they pay for, the delivery of the water sewer and keeping up the system, but also these other city expenses. And so I know that there's this charge, this plan to increase the water rates by 6.5%. But has there been an effort to look at those indirect costs and make sure that we're not shifting, costs that are actually city costs onto the water sewer fund? Because if we didn't do that, it would be a way to make sure, it would be a way to kind of not have to increase water rates. If we weren't putting those charges that weren't related to the water sewer fund onto the water sewer fund, then maybe we could avoid having to raise the water rates at 6.5%, because that's a cost that just really hits customers.
And to your point, absolutely. So, this year we did a full review of indirect costs. This is from bottom up. So Black and Veatch came in, they spoke to all of the departments, investigated, what they did, down to at the hour, what each employee did, what their functions were. And that's where that number came from. So it had been several years since we'd done a reanalysis of the indirect costs. And you will see that shift around. Some departments, now have more indirect costs, some have less, but in total, it did go down by almost 600,000. So, yes, there has been a review, and a very, very thorough review. And having been part of it, I can say it was a pretty thorough review. We spent quite a bit of time on analyzing what our indirect costs were and making sure that, what I did was allocated properly to water fund versus general fund, because a little bit of my time is spent on both. But, I'm not budgeted that way. So we need to make sure that my time is properly allocated over to, a little bit goes to the water fund, part of it goes to the general fund. And the end result of that was that the whole thing went down by about $600,000. So that does mean, $600,000 that's no longer being charged to the water sewer fund. So it has gone down year over year. And that's inclusive of the fact that, there are real world increases. So, that's $600,000 in, nominal dollars, but real world, that's down a little bit more when you consider that everything costs a little bit more. So yes, we have done that analysis this year.
Madam Chair, I had a follow-up question. I'm really glad that you're paying close attention to that, because it just seemed, the numbers seemed high. I just looked at the indirect cost report that came out, and it seemed like I just did these numbers really quickly, but it seemed like 25% of the law department was paid for by the water sewer fund, and that I just couldn't see that. But I'm glad that you're taking a look at that, and I just hope that those kinds of, that kind of attention will continue. And I just, along the same lines, like property taxes, well, parking tickets first. A lot of residents talk about parking tickets and red light tickets, and I know that the revenue does come in, but everybody wants to make sure it's not because of the revenue that we're doing parking tickets and red light tickets. And a lot of people have like concerns that sometimes that parking ticket activity and red light ticket activity is driven more by like revenue, generating revenue. So I get a lot of feedback about that, and would it make sense, as part of doing the red light ticket camera review, to see if there's been any impact on traffic safety as a result of not having cameras? Like, is there more, crashes because there's no cameras, or is there like no impact on safety as a result of the cameras?
Ms. Mergler?
Hi, Stephanie Merkler, Deputy Chief of Staff. Unfortunately, these are really more operational questions. So our Office of Management and Budget, they work really hard and they do the budget projection, whether to evaluate the red light camera program would be more of a policy question, which I'm sure our finance department would be happy to answer in the next hearing.
Okay, I just had one more follow-up.
Thank you, Ms. Mergler.
Madam Chair, could I have one more follow-up?
Go ahead.
Just in terms of property taxes, there has been a boom in residential property values, but there's also been a big boom in commercial development. And so, I've heard from a lot of residents that they think their homes are overvalued. And then you also see properties that, they've been built for like $50 million, and they're assessed at $25 million in the last couple of years. So I'm really happy to hear that the city is still looking at possible systemic issues with the property tax valuations. And I guess my last question, which maybe you can't answer, but I'll ask it anyway, is I've been advocating for the city and county to get a third party to fact check the numbers, and I would just say, my question is like, what are your options, or what are you doing? Everybody talks about we are doing that, but maybe that's not a question for you.
That is not an OMB question. That is a policy question. That is absolutely something the mayor's office is still working on. We discuss it every day. We're just not ready to discuss it in this hearing right now. But yes, we are absolutely still working on doing a systemic adjustment with the county.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Do we have any questions from the public? I just wanted to make sure that I wanted to go back and forth. Councilmember Owens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have one question, and I don't know if it should be targeted towards revenue or not. It has to do with our tax abatement program. Do we track how much funds we lose from properties that qualify for that at all?
Yes. Yeah, and that actually is built into our modeling.
Okay.
So I don't have the number in front of me, but it is something that we could get for you.
Thank you for that. That's all I have.
Any other questions from any other council members? Councilmember McCoy?
A question that I can basically receive, or my colleagues can receive perhaps later. Just wanted to find out, when you talk about the indirect costs, and I'm so glad you had taken the time to actually go through everything, and you found the savings, which is great. But I just wanted to know, is there any way to kind of get like an itemization of each of those components, just because I don't know what indirect costs actually is made up of? That's it. I know that's nothing that we're going to do here on the floor, but I'm just curious.
We've provided the indirect cost model to council, and Black & Veatch is preparing a final report as well that kind of contextualizes the information. Once that's ready, we'll send that along as well.
Thank you.
And at sort of the higher level, you will see that indirect cost change in individual departments. So that doesn't give you the the breakout of the sourcing. Okay. So you can see the report that Black & Veatch will be providing and the mayor's office is providing.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments from the public? And then I'm going to come back to the council members. We just want to make sure that we are allowing them the opportunity if they are online. Okay, council members? All right, if none, at this time, I would like to thank Mr. Winkler, OMB Director, and Ms. Mergler for your time and for this particular presentation. And so at this point, we are getting ready to close out this session. And if there are any other follow-up information, I ask that you provide that to Ms. Bassnight. And so at this time, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we are going to excuse me for 1 minute. Okay. Thank you. So yes, we're going to take a 10-minute break and resume at 6 o'clock p.m. So thank you for your presentation and your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Return back in the chambers at 6 o'clock. Good evening, honorable members of council, Chief of Staff Simmons, Deputy Chief of Staff, Mayor Carney Stephanie Mergler, Department Heads, Office of Management and Budget, Finance Director Taylor, Deputy Finance Director McLaughlin, and members of the public. I'm calling to order the Finance Committee budget hearing for the Finance Department as we are just resuming from a 10-minute break. I would first like to start by recognizing members of the Finance Committee that are in attendance this evening by doing a roll call. Council members Darby, Oliver,
Present.
Gracie,
Present.
Hackett,
Present.
Spadola, President Congo. I would also like to acknowledge other council members present. Council members Owens,
Present.
Cabrera,
Present.
Wheeler,
Present.
Johnson,
Here.
Field, and McCoy.
Here.
Thank you, council members. First, I would like to inform everyone that public comments will be asked at the end of each department's budget hearing, and that we look forward to participation from the public. Public comments are going to be limited to 3 minutes. If there is any follow-up information during any of the budget hearings, Ms. Bass-Knight will track and follow up on those requests. The budget hearings are limited due to time constraints, and I ask that if all can be mindful and respectful of time. I will mention that as the chair of finance, that if there needs to be a clarifying question or point, I'm letting you know now that I will take that privilege to do that if there needs to be a clarifying point, which is different from a question. All budget questions should be of a fiscal budgetary manner and will be limited based upon time limitations. I ask that if my colleagues have any questions to please raise your hand. It is intended for each department to present, then questions will be slated afterwards. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hayford, OMB Fiscal and Operational Analyst, to provide a financial overview, then followed by Director Taylor, as well as for a question and answer session with council. This hearing is tentatively slated for 90 minutes. Mr. Hayford.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Council President, and honorable members of City Council. This evening, I would like to present the Finance Department FY2026 budget on behalf of the Office of Management and Budget. Next slide, please. The department's proposed budget request, which includes the general and water source funds, is $20.8 million. Next slide, please. The proposed general fund budget request is over $11 million. This represents an increase of about $148,000, or 1.3% over the FY 2025 budget. Next slide, please. Here are the personal services changes. Total positions increased a net of 0.35 FTE. A new database manager position was created. It is split funded, 35% general fund and 65% water source fund, at a cost of almost $43,000 in salaries and benefits to the general fund. 5 split funded and 2 fully funded general fund positions were upgraded as part of the HR department's mid-year staff realignment. This added almost $44,000 in salaries and benefits to the general fund. In total, regular salaries rose by $166,000 due to these position changes, as well as cost of living adjustments and anniversary step increases. Next slide, please. MS&E in the general fund decreased a net total of almost $168,000, or 3.3%. Here are the various account changes. Temporary agencies decreased by $15,000. as the department will rely on its internal resources for collections. Consultants increased by $70,000 to assist with the implementation and development of a citywide training initiative and wage tax collections. $200,000 was added to cover rising costs associated with sheriff series, particularly for securing legal representation for collections. Parking citation commissions decreased by $587,000 due to a move to a new vendor for billing and revenue collection for the parking citations program. Red light camera commissions increased by $104,000 to cover a 2.5% increase in the contract to administer the program. Wage and head tax audit increased by $55,000 to cover increased charges from external law and accounting firms used to assist in the collection of wage and head taxes. Debt service increased by $119,400, mainly due to estimated principal and interest payments on the 2025 bond. Next slide, please. Moving on to the water source fund. The department budget request is about $9.7 million. This represents an increase of $1.4 million or 16.8% over the FY2025 budget. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. Thanks. Here are the personal services changes. Total positions increased by a net 0.65 FTE. A new database manager position was created. It is split funded, 65% water source fund and 35% general fund, at a cost of $79,000 in salaries and benefits to the water source fund. 5 split funded and 2 fully funded water source fund positions were upgraded as part of the HR department's media staff realignment. This added $44,000 in salaries and benefits to the water source fund. In total, regular salaries rose by $161,000 due to these position changes, as well as cost of living adjustments and anniversary step increases. Next slide, please. MSNE in the water source fund increased a net total of $1.1 million, or 22.7%. Here are some of the major funding changes. Consultants increased a net total of $30,000. $55,000 was added for technical skills training. However, this was offset by a $25,000 reduction in project support for the billing technology implementation. Miscellaneous charges, NOC, decreased by $75,000, mainly due to the utility assistance program being reduced from $350,000 to $250,000. This $100,000 reduction was partially offset by a $25,000 increase in call center support to assist with citywide 311 initiatives. Contracted maintenance services rose by $147,800 to cover maintenance and support software fees for the new utility billing customer information system. $60,000 was added to address rising costs associated with sheriff series, particularly for securing legal representation for collections. Indirect costs rose by $827,000 per the new indirect cost model developed by Black & Veatch. Finally, computer software licenses rose by $147,800 to cover the new utility billing customer information software. This concludes my presentation, and I will answer any questions pertaining to the budget. If not, I will return the floor to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Is it Ms. Mergler? Are we going to go where? Councilmember Oliver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. He said, it's a question now. I just had the one question on the collection expense of red light cameras. You said it went up a 2.5 increase, and on the other, and on the other slide, it said it had decreased. So whenever you want to answer that.
I said red light camera increased $104,000.
Yes, may I follow up?
Yes.
So I guess maybe Ms. Brett can answer. I just wonder why it was increased on this sheet. Now on the other sheet it said decrease. I just wonder if Marshall, you want to, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and actually, it'd be part of one of the written questions that's in the PowerPoint.
Okay, I just saw that. Sorry, I'm done. Thank you.
Turn it over to, hold on 1 minute, please.
Only because he said if anybody had a question, so.
Councilmember Willard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question about the indirect cost increase to the Finance Department of $827,000.
Chair. I'm sorry, that's part of the written questions, and Brett is going to get to that in his first written question, the indirect costs.
Oh,
I think when he said, do you have a question? So I threw it out. I'm sorry about
I
that.
know.
I knew that didn't sound right, but I didn't. I thought maybe he wasn't. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay.
All right. We're going to proceed to Director Taylor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of City Council. Could you go to the first slide, please? There you go.
There we go.
Thank you. Our mission has not changed over the last 7 years that I've been here. When we first came on, one of the things that we wanted to emphasize to our employees is to provide excellence in financial management, and what that comes from everything from customer service to our financial integrity. Our job is to preserve the financial integrity of the city through our accounting practices, our customer service, and our financial management. And in many cases, that includes technology. Next slide. And our vision hasn't changed. We want to have enhanced engagement with our customers, very reliable accounting practices with strong quality control, streamline our collection processes to maximize our revenue opportunities, and to implement best practices and to improve business processes, data management, and leverage technology most effectively. Now, I want to place the Department of Finance in context. According to the FY24 financial statements, we have approximately $413 million that flows through the Department of Finance in any given year. That includes general fund, water sewer fund, federal funds, pension funds, grants from the state and the private sector. We do over $1.3 million in transactions. We have approximately 40,000 water utility customers, 27,000 property customers in which we issue property taxes. We have approximately 110,000 wage tax payers to the city. That doesn't include, add on, our parking tickets, in which we issue about 50,000 parking tickets a year. Actually, that number has dropped, and I'll get into that in a little bit. And the same for the red light camera program. So we have a lot of transactions coming through our department. One of the things we're trying to do is modernize our computer systems in order to more effectively produce more accurate bills. to be able to collect revenues on a more timely basis, and to be able to have customers be a lot more transparent to customers. Two initiatives that we are focused on this year are going to be the implementation and launch of a new utility billing. We've also included, we're going to call it a billing system called Encuesta. It's going to include water utility billing, property tax billing, and licenses and inspection billings. It'll all be placed into a new database that will be outside of the current Munis database. The Munis database was created back in 2006, and we're finding that it is not meeting the needs of our operation, and it's not meeting the needs of the customers. Bills come out, they may be inaccurate. The bills may not be as clear to customers as we would like. The database has to be reviewed and make sure that the customer accounts are accurate and the like. We started this process about 2 years ago, and we have a July 1st launch for the new utility bills. Now, the customer's utility bill is not going to change that dramatically. It will have a lot more information on it so that the utility customer can, it'll be a lot more transparent. The other part of this is that we're going to create a portal that customers can actually sign into, and they can look at all of their history. That way, you know, we often get 3,000 calls a month, and it's usually the majority of those calls are for general information about the bills. And what we want to do is be able to be a lot more transparent. Customers will be able to go in and see all of their activity, all of their detail. In fact, there'll be maps and meter information and lots more information that the customer may need to be able to make decisions. It will also show them a lot more history with regard to how much water they're consuming, what their property taxes look like, and their L&I fees. That's going to launch in July 1st. We're going to have a community campaign launched in May. We are going to be sending out notices to everyone, telling them about the new system. The second thing is that we did a review this past year on a new enterprise management system. This is our total financial system. This review basically reaffirmed that we should be looking at upgrading our financial system. We have included money in the capital budget to be spent over 5 years to refresh this system. So we'll be focusing on that once we go ahead and have the launch. So 2026 for the finance department, we'll be focused on a lot of technology. We're hoping that that technology will do two things: automate our internal systems more effectively. That way it'll cut down on the number of transactions that the employees will need to be doing. And number two, to make it a lot more transparent for customers to understand their bills and easier to pay. Now, one of our requests in our budget is for a database manager. That's a new position. We feel very strongly that we need to have somebody who's going to be the custodian of all this data, and to make sure that we have better quality control in the bills that we issue and the payments that come in. This will hopefully reduce the number of calls coming into the city, just from general inquiries to bills that we have to correct. A lot more technology is needed in the city. We haven't grown as technology has grown, and hopefully that's going to provide us with a lot more opportunity to make investments in tech and to utilize our employees in a more effective way. Our employees should be looking for the exceptions. They should be looking for quality control and quality assurance as opposed to the rote transactions that they are doing at the current moment. My final point is twofold. One is I am incredibly impressed with the employees in the finance department. To handle this many transactions and this amount of money coming through and be able to answer customer questions We can't answer them all, to be honest. However, I think they do a really, really good job at meeting the customer needs. We have gone through our audits. We continue to obtain the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting from the GFOA. Again, I'm really proud of where we are. I think that we're taking the next step. This is a point of inflection for the Department of Finance. The new technology is going to help us propel into what we call the space age, whereas right now we're still driving kind of Model Ts. So hopefully that'll help us a great deal. And my last comment before we get into questions is I was remiss in not introducing our new Deputy Director, Lois McLaughlin, who has been with the city for 16 years, 18 years, has been appointed our Deputy Director for Finance. She has been a very trusted advisor for me for the last 7 years, and it's only fitting that she fits into this job. And she's hit the ground running. So welcome, Lois. I appreciate it. And she was very instrumental in helping us get the numbers together for tonight. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over and we can do questions and answers.
Okay, before I get started with the questions, what transactions are going to be housed in the new system? You said that earlier. What are they?
It'll be the property tax.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be the utility billing. And it'll be the licenses and inspection ticketing program. Now, part of that is some of the permits from land use also come with some of the tickets that come through. So we're slowly integrating some of the land use into that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So we're going to start with question number 1. Understanding the city has the responsibility to ensure that indirect costs adequately reflects the best usage for services that are aligned with the water sewer fund. Please justify the $8.5 million water sewer fund budgeted citywide for the indirect costs, down $600,000 from the previous year budget, yet while realizing the FY2026 proposed water and sewer rate increase of 6.5% and stormwater for 6%. Please explain, considering that indirect costs for the finance department has increased of $827,000 for water sewer fund. So I'm just going to ask that you address A, B, and C, so you can just specify each one of them.
Sure. I'm not going to read all of this. Just some overarching comments. Number 1, I think that this is probably best addressed when we have the water sewer fund discussion.
Okay.
Number 2, as Rob Winkler had indicated, we had a indirect cost study that was done. The dollar amount that came out of that for our budget was included, and it was included into our budget. It is a direct result of the Black and Veatch analysis. But let me put it into context for you. If you look at the differences between the property tax L&I parking analysis, the number of transactions that go through our department versus the water utility, we issue 40,000 bills a month. Not only do you issue a bill, you have to be on the receiving end of the payments that come in. So we do of that $1.3 million number of transactions, 1.3 million transactions, approximately 800,000 of that is related to utility bills alone. So what it is a very labor-intensive, very time-intensive, customer-focused portion of our responsibilities. We get more questions about that particular segment of what we do than any other in terms of calls coming into 311. With that said, every payment has to be reconciled. Every bill has to be, checked. When calls come in, we work with customers. On top of that, we have to collect. The majority of our collections activity revolves around unpaid utility bills. We need to do that in order to keep our utility solvent. Our utility is based on the amount of revenue that comes in. And it's really critical that we keep the utility solvent. If we need to allocate people to make sure that the revenue is coming in, we'll do that. We'll do so. There's other indirect costs associated with it. Number of contracts that come through. Law department has to look at them. Number of bids that come through. The procurement division has to look at all the bids. There's a lot of segments outside of even the Department of Finance that impact that indirect cost. I will leave it up to Black and Veatch to give a little bit more explanation to it, but I wanted to put it in context in terms of the amount of transactions that come through and the internal controls that are necessary in order to make sure that we appropriately bill and we appropriately collect revenues for the utility.
Okay, so that's your overview for A, B, and C. Okay. All right, we're going to move on to question number 2. I'm going to ask the council members to please keep track of the questions and how Director Taylor is answering the questions. Okay, while understanding one of Council's FY2026 budget priorities is financial stability, sustainability, which is the reason Council codified Ordinance 23-019, funding for the Water Utility Assistance Program shall derive each fiscal year from an appropriation contained in that fiscal year's annual operating budget ordinance. The amount of funding for each fiscal year's Water Utility Assistance Program shall be an amount that is no less than 1% of such fiscal year's Water Sewer Fund operation and maintenance reserve. Please discuss the $250,000 Water Sewer Fund budgeted for the Utility Assistance Program, considering $350 was budgeted in FY 2025, and you can just answer from A to E.
Well, as the numbers see, as you can see, if you go to the next slide, please. Right now, our number of recipients under this program, which was originally started in 21 under the CARES Act, was supplemented by the ARPA, and then in 2024 and 25, we added money as part of the water utility because we could no longer use the ARPA or CARES Act money. 931 individuals have requested funds. We have just a little bit left of that 1.3 million that was allocated. I also want to draw your attention to the Low-Income Water Assistance Program, the LIWAP program, which has been, it was 1 year in which we were cooperating with the state. Those funds are no longer available. We issued 1.8 million to 847 recipients. Again, I think that this program, if we continue it on in FY26, provides an opportunity for approximately anywhere between 200 to 300 individuals to access assistance. The average amount right now under this program is $1,500 that you can get in assistance. But we often make concessions with customers all the time. If they wish to pay over time, we can set up payment plans. If they wish to pay up front, we'll often waive penalties and interest on their delinquent bills. So what they need to do is give us a call. We listen, we will talk to anyone. Now, there may be mitigating circumstances, such as income or previous payment agreements that have been broken, default rates and like, but we will talk to anyone who wants to call in, can talk to us about how to rectify their past due delinquent bills.
Chairwoman, if I might add,
Yes,
apologies.
Ms. Bergler.
I know you asked in the question why it's budgeted at 250 rather than 350 this year. That is a mistake on our part. You'll notice that we are increasing it back up to $300,000 in third and final. We notate that in a slide further down. we will have some money carrying over from this year that will bring the entire total up to 350,000 in the
Okay.
fund overall.
All right, thank you for that clarity. Mr. Director Taylor, is that your
that's-
final? Okay, for question number 2. Okay, question number 3, realizing the challenges the city has endured with the munis financial system over the years, can you discuss the $200,000 in the proposed budget for a new ERP system regarding a study in the miscellaneous services account line for water sewer fund, considering a similar amount for $200,000 was budgeted in the previous year? Discuss the $297,000 in the FY2026 capital budget for updating the ERP financial system, and specify the appropriate and approximate timeframe schedule for implementation, considering the city is typically delayed when going to the bond market.
Well, as I addressed earlier,
Yes.
we are going to be putting more money into the ERP system. This was all based on a review by Gartner Consulting. I think initially we're looking at, we constructed a game plan, a time frame, and a cost estimate. FY26 funding will be for actually 2 steps, 2 phases. One, the first phase is going to be development of the RFP, the review and selection of the vendor. And then the second phase will be the actual execution once we get the vendor on, and we will be looking for a project management team to help us work through the implementation. It will probably take, we're thinking that this is going to be a 3-year effort. It's going to, putting a new financial system in takes a little bit of time. So that's what we're going to be focusing on FY26.
I will also add, this will be another third and final change. We determined that we are able to take the 200,000 that we're planning, that we have budgeted in the general fund for this. We can take that out of the capital funds. So you'll see that change made in third and final.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to Ms. Bassnight.
Yes, and I just want to just say for the clarifying record, the amount for the capital fund is $2,970,000. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to question number 4. Okay, Mr. Taylor, can you discuss the current vacant positions, duration of the vacancy, the time frame for filing positions, if the position generates revenue, and if so, estimated amount, and specify any impact to overtime, temp agency, or consultants, and justify the need for the position?
Well, anytime you have vacant positions, it puts pressure on your temps and overtime. We intend to have these positions filled. The senior accountant's obviously important from the standpoint of having internal controls, particularly with regard to things like reconciliation of revenues. Principal analyst, I'm happy to say, is a result of the promotion of Lois to deputy director and leaving her position currently vacant. So we'll be looking for someone who's going to help us with that position. Is important. They help develop the budget. They also do all the contract reviews for the department, as well as helping with the revenue roll-ups for WEFAC and other miscellaneous items such as some HR and some of the payroll issues. Administrative assistant too, that is a position that assists myself and the deputy director. That position became vacant in January. We are having interviews as we speak. The administrative clerk, this is a result of a person getting a promotion. That position works in central cashiering and works directly with the citizens to post their payments and do the reconciliation of the revenue. Assistant audit revenue agent and the senior, the assistant audit revenue agent is down in our collections area. And is that the collections piece or is that up in Gene's? Okay. These two, the audit agent and the senior earned income tax agent, are both in wage tax. Those are wage tax positions. We hopefully can eliminate some of our temp support by having these two agents up in the position. They are direct revenue. They go out and make sure that they do audits for companies to make sure that employees are paying their withholding.
Okay. I see where they're due to be filled. So I'm assuming some will be posted later. Correct.
All of them have been posted at the moment, correct?
They're all posted?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Even the ones, okay. I saw 6:30 on there. I was just curious.
Yep. And we encourage any and all to apply.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on to question number 5. Discuss any proposed changes to positions, whether they be new, deleted, upgraded, or realigned, transition, downgrade, title change, or salary change, and specify if the new database manager position has any correlating impact with revenue generating, and if so, please share.
As I had mentioned earlier, our database manager, we'd like to hire a database manager to manage the customer database. Without putting too fine a point on it, the narrative is a little bit more eloquent than what I can describe. But over the last 18 years that we've had Munis, we haven't done a good job at quality control. We need to get in, take a look at the data. We have data that dates back to before Munis was even brought into the system. Before that data came over from an old Harris system. It's still sitting in the database. So what we need to do, now most of those accounts are inactive and they don't get billed. But what it does is it creates confusion on the part of our internal employees trying to research records. We want to go ahead and do a complete purge, but we need somebody there to be a gatekeeper to make sure the data goes in and it goes in correctly so that the bills can be correct. Okay. And that just comes from being able to manage it, and you need to have somebody who's focused on managing it.
Okay. B, considering the FY26 proposed 6.5 water rate and 6% stormwater increase, can you justify the necessity for the new database manager position, particularly since the cost for this new position is split funded 65% water sewer fund and 35% general fund? In other words, heavily funded by the water sewer fund.
Well, I'll put it two ways. One is by having a better database, we can bill more accurately. By billing more accurately, we can be more, we will reduce our accounts receivable, meaning if someone doesn't understand their bill, they're going to be less likely to pay it, right? So by having an accurate bill that's explanatory, we hope that it will generate revenue and people will be able to pay their bill more effectively. Number two, when a bill is incorrect, it costs salaries. When a customer calls in, they have to talk to the 311 operator, they have to talk to a customer service rep, then they talk to an account services consultant to possibly go on a payment agreement. The salaries from inefficient processes, this will directly mean a savings in the amount of time that these salaries are working on individual customer contracts. From that standpoint, backlogs, we can catch up with more better utilization of employees. So there's a savings down the road as well. Overall, By having a new utility billing system and having a database manager, we've established that we would see a savings / additional revenue stream of about $1.5 to $2.5 million extra a year. That was done by Black and Beach. That was the assessment that was done by Black and Beach. That year-over-year system will pay itself back in 2.5 years. And that money will more than pay for this database manager's position.
Okay, all right. We're going to move on to question number 6. Okay, can you please discuss the plan used for $1.370 million in professional services, temp agencies, and consultants, up $85,000 over the prior year's budget, $745,000 general fund, $625,000 water sewer fund, in conjunction with a proposed budget for 84 FTEs, and you can just address items number A through E.
Sure. Let me just consult with Lois. If you go to the next slide, please. We spent a good bit of money on integrity staffing. Primarily, we have 13 temporary full and part-time staff supporting 9 divisions. We bring them in order for short-term engagements, such as helping with the front desk at the administrative offices, to helping in customer service and in wage tax and the like. We have also consultants that we bring in, such as working with our accounting staff on finishing the financial statements for the year. We often have accountants brought in by Robert Half and some of the other major accounting firms, temporary accounting firms, that supplement that. In addition, we also pay for a good portion of auditing fees that come in and the like. So this is all in order to support, and these are limited engagement temporaries. So instead of bringing on full-time staff, they also backfill for the full-time staff that we have as part of our vacancies. Like I said, up in wage tax, we have 2 vacancies. We bring in some of the part-time staff to help out with that. We have part-time staff helping with the administrative as well as the customer service responsibilities down on the first floor.
Let's see.
Okay. We can go into the contract. The contract consultants will go into a greater detail later in the presentation.
Okay. So let's see here. We are.
Yeah, question number 6. If you go to the next slide, it'll tell you where the temps are located.
Yes, please.
Okay. Mostly, well, they're pretty evenly distributed across parking, earned income tax, accounting, or the 3, and billing are really the 4 different areas that we have them working in. Also, there's question E. Explain the fund allocated for the water billing technology implementation. I think I explained that a little earlier. We allocated $5.4 million for the project. It's on budget, on schedule. We're ready to go live July 7th. Like I said, we've got a initial projected ROI on this of about 2.5 years.
So as it relates to the billing for the new system, are they going to talk about that more with Black and Veatch in terms of how it's going to be calculated versus from the gallons, the 2,000 gallons?
We made the decision to keep it at 1,000 gallons this year. Now, the new system could get down to gallons, but for all intents and purposes, your rates are not going to your rate may change because of the percentage change, but the methodology is not necessarily going to change.
Okay. All right. All right, thank you. All right, we can move on to.
By the way, we
Yes.
are scheduling a April 28th. City council members are more than welcome to attend. We're going to have a presentation here in Chambers for the city employees, mainly the Department of Finance, plus anyone else who's interested, on the new, we're calling it the Encuesta system, on the new billing system.
Okay,
April 28th, starting at 1:30.
okay. Thank you. Thanks for that information. All right, so we're going to move right on into question number 7. So while realizing the significance of the amount of funds that are overdue to the city of Wilmington from outstanding collections, which is partially accounted in the revenue projections, please discuss the budgetary resources allocated for collection efforts across both general and water sewer funds for $1.5 million and specify the return on investment for both internal and external costs, considering cost has increased $315,000. And you can just go over again, answer from A to E.
If you go to the next slide,
Uh-huh.
this outlines those costs. Avenue Insights, they are a collection agency for the wage tax program. We estimate that there are approximately $1.3 million in wage tax that we need to collect. We're going to be handing that portfolio over to Avenue Insights to help us with that. As part of the wage tax process, too, we have what we call skip tracing. This helps us locate individuals who have back wage tax delinquencies. That's through Thomas Reuter. Manning, Gross, and Massenburg, as well as Giordano, Del Colo, Werb, and Gagne. They are attorneys that we work with in a number of areas to help us go out and collect on outstanding delinquencies. Manning, Gross, and Massenburg has been dedicated to some of our more complex commercial accounts, including some governmental entities. They help untangle some of the nuances with regard to that. Sometimes, collecting from companies can be somewhat complex, particularly when you're looking at financials. So we have them dedicated to that. The Giordano Del Colo is associated with all of our processing through sheriff sales. They file what they call, I sign the monition, they file the monition and the Vendex with the courts in order to get it scheduled. And that has been, one of our things has been to go out and start really looking at our collections. We have brought our collections, particularly in the water sewer fund, down from a high of $28 million down to $19 million in terms of our accounts receivable. So we've done a really good job at trying to chip away at that, and this is all part of that. The Paymentus is our credit card processing. So when you file online and you pay via online banking through the tax system down on the first floor, but mainly through the online payment system, they're the ones who process it. Now, they increase their amounts occasionally, right? Did they have an increase this year? It's a tiered increase. So we have to deal with their annual increases. However, we did not want to RFP this because we were implementing a new billing system. We wanted to keep in place our Paymentus partnership. Blindsight is our 311 service. It is located in the finance department for payment. We've allocated it. We've split funded it between the general fund and the water sewer fund, and then of course the utility assistance program. That should be we've been looking at that as being $350,000 this year. Okay, so that'll be part of the third and final.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think D.
I'm sorry.
D, the next page.
Any occurring one-time agreements?
Okay, let's see here.
Oh, D&E, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
That's why I have Lois here. It was a great hire. When you're looking at ROI, there's a couple things to consider. Again, we are always cognizant of expenses, but we don't hire for the sake of hiring. In FY23, we had a pretty successful year in terms of turning back money to us. The revenue collected was about $3 million. That has subsequently dropped in FY24, and we figure it's going to be about the same, maybe a little higher in FY25. FY23, we had a larger number of sheriff sales. We also had a larger number of revenue collection from our parking tickets and red light camera tickets. Changes in our approaches to the sheriff sales, water disconnections, parking ticket reform has dropped that number somewhat. As you recall, we had increased our parking ticket thresholds from $500 to $600 for a tow, from $200 to $300 for a boot. That has impacted our collections process. Likewise, we are, you will see in FY25 in particular, we made an agreement with City Council not to include water utility debt as part of our decision to go to munition. That has brought the number of sheriff sales down considerably. So we're not going to be having these revenues collected to the extent that we did in FY23. The monies, the expenses are going to continue to be the same. We're hoping to refocus a little bit. For instance, one of the areas that we have not taken a look at and we're going to do in FY26 are L&I delinquencies. There's approximately $6.8 million in unpaid licenses and inspection fees that have not been paid. So we hope in FY26 we're going to have a look at that particular segment of collectibles. Likewise, we're looking at improving our wage tax collections. Like I said, we're going to be using Avenue to go out and see if we can collect some of that $1.3 million that we know is sitting out there. So we're going to be looking at different segments. We're going to continue our efforts towards utility billing and property taxes. Property taxes are going to be kind of interesting given the fact that we're going to be having new assessments going out. There's going to be a lot of questions about those bills. But I think that there are other areas that we can refocus in order to make sure that we are collecting more revenue than we are spending in terms of expenses. Like I said, the total delinquencies for accounts over 91 days is $35 million. This is a long-standing legacy issue. Those numbers have been out there for more than 10 years. We've been chipping away at it by having better collections efforts. We have reduced the water sewer delinquencies down to 19 million. Every year, right now, as of in FY24, our account services team collected $16.1 million in arrears. And our waste tax team collected $1.7 million in earned income back taxes. You can't, we try to be customer friendly. We give everybody the opportunity, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we're bringing in the revenue necessary to keep the operations going.
Understood. Okay, we're going to move on to question number 8. Can you discuss the planned use for $525,000 for water sewer fund in the Central Cashier Division regarding the citywide 311 initiative up $25,000 over the prior year's budget? Share the rationale for why this cost is funded 100% with the water sewer fund.
Well, we had, like we had said, I put a note here, we're going to shift the narrative to split funding. We went from 100% funding by the finance department. We've made a decision to split that between the general fund and the water sewer fund.
This will be another third and final change.
Okay. Can you repeat that?
This will be another change you'll see in third and final.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
However, as I described earlier, most of our calls that do come in are for the water utility.
Okay. All right. Okay, we're going to move on to question number 9. For the UBCIS costs budgeted within the contracted maintenance and computer and software licenses account line in the water sewer fund for $295,616, please discuss this new additional cost and specify if this is an item that is a potential for the capital budget.
Unfortunately, it is not. This licensing and maintenance expense is an operating budget cost. The actual building of the system can be attributed to the capital line, but because it is treated from an accounting standpoint as an operating budget item. The good news is that I think that it's going to actually save us some money, because what will happen is they will provide upgrades to the system every year, whereas the system now, if we want an upgrade to the system or if there's any development costs with the system, we have to pay ad hoc. So this is going to be a standard cost that's going to be associated with maintaining the system.
All right. That's pretty straightforward. We're going to move on to question number 10. Can you discuss the planned use of $2.94 million budgeted in commissions account lines? And you can just kind of go over A through F.
Sure. Let me just stick one. These are related primarily to parking and red light and false alarms. Okay. We utilize outside contractors for these particular systems. The false alarm is provided by Cry Wolf. This is, there's an ordinance on city false alarm that if you have a habitual false alarm, then you can go out and we can charge individuals for that particular call. Cry Wolf goes out and monitors this and collects. For parking citations, we have two areas that we will focus on. One is, I have to make a correction here. The parking citation for Passport. Passport's a new system. We went out and we RFP'd for a new parking citation system because the previous vendor, who actually runs the red light camera program as well, was not providing us with the data necessary to run the program effectively. We went out on a competitive RFP, Passport won. We actually saved $500,000 as a result.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
The State of Delaware Memorandum of Understanding, we have a DMV registration hold program. We got a notice. Basically what they do is they hold registration for people who have not paid their red light camera. That actually, parking citations, that actually should say red light camera. They hold registrations for people who have not paid their red light camera violations. We have to pay DMV a portion of the proceeds from the collection of those revenues as a result.
Okay.
It's all part of a memorandum of agreement that we signed back, gosh, this has probably been in place since 2009.
Okay.
The Paylock, Paylock is our booting service that we use, and Elevate is our red light camera operator. They handle everything from the red light cameras themselves to the actual bills to collections of the payments and a collection of outstanding red light camera violations. They have a annual increase to their contract of 2.5%. 2.5%. So you'll see that that is going up. In prelude to the number of questions that I'm sure I'm going to get during the question and answer session, we intend this year to RFP for a new red light camera program vendor. The reason is multifold. Many of them are based on questions that the City Council have posed, but I can get into that when we get into the question and answer session.
Okay. All right. So we are on, let's see, projected.
The next question 10,
Yes.
D.
D.
This outlines what we see in terms of projections for each of the vendors that we're looking at. Also, the statistics for booting and towing. Question E is a little more difficult for us to define because we do not separate out boots and tows for parking and red light. When we use a single contractor to do both, okay? They see the violation pop up. It's going to require us to go in and talk to the two different vendors to get a split out of that. But item F gives you a sense of where we are with respect to our boots and toes. The numbers have dropped pretty precipitously in FY25, and that's a direct result of increasing the thresholds from 200 to 300 and 500 to 600 on the toes and boot thresholds. So it is having an impact on the number of tickets that we are issuing, and of course would have relative impact on the amount that we would be bringing in.
Okay. You want to move on to E? G and F? Are we on G?
Okay, G relates to parking citations. As you can see, our parking citations for FY25 issuances are down 28,000 or 29,000 over 45 last year. We also, if you recall, we eliminated one PREO last year. What we were seeing is due to parking reforms that were occurring and as part of the settlement that was done as part of the lawsuit, we're seeing performance coming, PREOs are out, they are patrolling, but they're patrolling for violations that are not within the purview of the lawsuit or these thresholds. So we're actually seeing less tickets being out there. The number of active permits, in FY24, there were 4,500 active permits, only from the standpoint of, if you recall, we made a transition on permitting. We decided to go with a split July 1st and January 1st. In FY25 year to date, we have a full 9,475 permits that have been issued on the residential parking permit, the digital parking permit. And then lastly, the number of red light registration holds for the last 2 years. we have collected as a result of a couple of different things. In FY25, DMV unilaterally decided that they were not going to put a registration hold on parking tickets. They went and reviewed the state code and the city code and the MOU and determined that red light camera was the only one that was legally eligible for a registration hold. That's why you have seen a reduction from FY24 to FY25, because we're not catching parking tickets at the DMV.
Okay.
So not only are we issuing less, we're catching less. Hence, we're watching the parking ticket revenue drop. Okay?
Okay. All right. All right. That covers a question. Okay. So we want to move over to J, K, and L.
Jay? Law firms assisting in collections. Right now, there is a 30% commission associated with the firm as a result of filing cases in court. However, the majority of this particular cost is associated with a flat fee for the filing of the monition and the court filings, and the distribution of collection letters for the wage tax unit. The monitions and court filings are mainly for property tax, utility billing, and L&I fees.
Okay.
The towing contract will be renewed on July 1st, 2025. We provided a 3-month extension to the contract to make it coterminous with the fiscal year, because it seemed to have gotten off of we had continuous extensions as we were going through the lawsuit. It is now currently out for bid.
Mm-hmm.
We expect those bids to come in May 2nd, I believe, and we will issue a new 1-year tow contract starting July 1.
Okay.
Now, if you recall last year, when the tow contracts came in, there was a fee to the customer for a tow. We do not anticipate that changing this year.
Okay.
L, the number of red light cameras down during calendar year 24 and to date calendar year 25. We had 12 cameras that were down. Keep in mind that these cameras go down intermittently. Not one camera is down, not a set of cameras are down for the entire year. They go offline based on a number of factors. A number of factors. Over half of the 46 cameras that we have in place are part of older generation. They have problems with the technology. That's why we want to replace them.
Okay.
Number 2, the new technology is much less susceptible to outages by Delmarva and changes in the modem technology through Comcast. This technology is actually sent via modem, and the power that goes into it is provided by Delmarva. If there is construction in the road, construction on the sidewalks, we have to remove what we call the pucks or the readers. There's a lot of construction impacts. A number of those cameras do go down. We've seen this happen more this year than ever before. Hence is why we're going to RFP for a new bidder for the red light camera program. Also, we have consulted with our law department. We can obtain a credit from the vendor for any of the red lights that come down for the actual cost per intersection lease costs. We cannot, however, go back and recoup, even in court. We wouldn't be able to, file something in court to recoup the revenue associated with it. So when a camera goes down, that's basically revenue that we can't recover. So we have a very serious concern about this particular vendor. They have been with the city since 2009. The technology has been upgraded only so often over the last 18 years.
Oh.
15 years. We need to really take a really serious, hard look at this program. One final point on red light cameras. Hopefully this will answer some questions that were brought up earlier. We obtain safety information from DelDOT. We do not keep that safety information. The crash data comes from DelDOT. And it's used for two reasons. One, we only put intersections that have been qualified by data through DelDOT as being high crash intersections. Okay? We do not make that determination. And yes, in answer to the question, can we align these cameras being down to crash data? The question is yes. However, DelDOT only provides it once a year. That is going to happen in April. They're going to provide us with the data. In fact, they said that it may be delayed. So we will have some crash data to be able to align to the production of these violations so we can see whether the violations are having some impact on the amount of crashes that are happening at the intersections. The last point is when we refresh the RFP with a new vendor, we will also be refreshing the data on all of our intersections to see whether or not there's a correlation between the violations and the crash data and determine whether or not those intersections are the most appropriate intersections. Based on the numbers that we're seeing, there are some intersections that have very, very few red light camera running. We think that maybe volumes are down on those intersections and the like. With that said, we want to make sure that that's aligned with the safety data. Okay. First and foremost, and I will emphasize this again, this is not a revenue generator. What this is a safety program. However, we're seeing that with cameras being down, we don't know whether that is having an impact on the crash data. So not only are we looking at the revenue data, we have to look at the crash data. So that'll all be done as part of the RFP process.
Great.
Hopefully I answered some
questions. I think that was very thorough as it related to the question that came up earlier. And so I'll loop back around once you finish the presentation. Okay, so we're going to move on to question number 11. Can you please discuss the $525,000 budgeted for lockbox charges, $200,000 from the general fund and $325,000 from the water sewer fund? Justify the rationale for higher cost allocation to the water sewer fund for these charges. Yes.
Well, what we're seeing is that this is a difficult thing to gauge. We don't know who's going to mail in bills and who's not. The lockbox charges are tied directly to your online payments. So hopefully when we build the new Enquesta system, we're going to try to shift as many people to online payments as possible. Now keep in mind that you're going to pay a cost either way. Right. You either pay for the lockbox charges, which a bank takes when you mail it in, lockbox comes in, it goes into a lockbox, bank looks at it, will give us the money and give us the ticket. They process that. However, if you shift over to online payments, we have to pay Paymentus a per transaction charge, and the city absorbs the credit card charge. So if Visa is charging 3.5% or 3% on the credit card charge, we made a decision 8 years ago to start absorbing that because we were transferring that charge to the customer. So not only were you paying a $25 water bill, you were also paying a 3.5 or 3% charge on top of it. we decided to take that. So the more you move to online payments, you're still going to have that kind of service charge. So what we're seeing is that there's a higher cost allocation depending on where they are going to be paying. As we will not know this number really until we get through a full year on the billing solution, the new billing solution, and to see how many people we drive to the online system. Okay, folks, just for the public, we will never get rid of the option to mail your payment in or walk in. So that's something that we're going to keep in place. We just hope that people will take advantage of the better system with the online payment portal.
Got it. All right. Thank you. All right. We're going to move to question number 12. Can you discuss the overall growth to the Finance Department's budget from FY22 to FY26 as to the percentage of growth immensely to the Water Sewer Fund compared with less growth to the General Fund? Please explain. And you can see letters A through F.
I've outlined it. You know, they're standard personnel drivers for the increases. This came from growth in salaries and benefits and from, as it was addressed earlier in the revenue piece, that there were, or when George had mentioned it, we went through a salary review and some of those costs had escalated as a result of that. Indirect costs we've addressed. Again, we can dig into the numbers, but keep in mind that, as I mentioned, utility billing, water sewer fund is a main cost driver for us. ERP costs, we had $200,000 in. The ERP is going to be part of that. Now, we can potentially look at some of the costs being shifted. Well, I'm sorry. This is for the ERP, not the UBCIS. The ERP costs, we're going to have some of that ERP cost associated with the water billing because we have to do an integration of our Enquesta system with the new financial system as well. The Utility Assistance Program, we're going to increase that to $350,000, which has been noted earlier. The 311 services, that is entirely in our budget. Now we're going to shift that. Again, that has to be corrected. We're going to shift it $100,000 to the general fund.
And reduce by $50,000.
And reduce it by $50,000. And then the UBCIS and Salesforce licenses also come out of our budget. Salesforce licenses are there for the 311 operators. It is a customer relationship management system. It tracks customer inquiries into the city. Those customer inquiries come to us. We share part of the cost.
Brett, do you mind if I clarify real quick? About 64,000 of that is Salesforce licenses for 311. About 60,000 is also in Public Works, and then the majority of that cost is actually in IT. So most of the Salesforce licenses for the 311 system are stored in the general fund under the Department of Information Technologies.
This dollar amount is, the majority of it's for the CIS project, licenses for the CIS program. That's the utility billings program.
Okay. All right. So we can move on to question number 12, which is, can you discuss the overall growth to the Finance Department's budget from FY22 to FY26 as to the percentage of growth?
We've already
13, yes, I was going to say. Energy is dropping here. Question 13. Okay. Can you please share the methodology that is used to determine how 84 full-time positions in the Finance Department can be split, funded 55.15 FTEs in the General Fund and 28.85 in the Water Sewer Fund? Please explain.
Well, you know, despite the fact that it is the most personnel intensive, Water Sewer Fund still has the fewer number of employees. But it's still very, very much labor intensive. I think what you're seeing is the indirect cost line is the reason for the increase mainly in our budget. Again, we'll address that when we talk about the water sewer fund.
Okay.
The 55 FTEs in the general fund, we still have wage tax, property tax. We manage all of the collection activity. We have the first floor customer service area. We have parking. We have procurement. If you go to if you look at the org chart, which is under question 14, it's 2 slides forward. It might be helpful. Marcia?
Yeah.
Oh. If you could go to slide number 36. This is effectively what we do and who we are. But as you can see, we've got 7, or if you include the administrative area, 8 divisions and operating units. And it's split across a lot of different areas. And we fund it, portions of certain persons, like my salary my cost is split between general fund and water sewer fund because I manage in both.
Okay.
Likewise on a number of areas, but say the procurement manager, the accounting manager, maybe a portion of their time, but they really are attributable to kind of the indirect costs that are associated with having to manage the financial function. Parking service manager wouldn't have any impact on the water sewer fund. It would be a direct general fund cost. So this gives you an overview of where our personnel costs are going.
Okay.
If you go to the next slide, which is slide number 37, you'll see some of the responsibilities that are under those divisions. Oh, and go to slide number 38. Parking enforcement and procurement. We have a lot of moving parts in finance.
All right. So does that, and then your last question? Let's see.
That was the last question.
Do we have, that was the last one?
We just had the one regarding the $300,000 in capital budget for the renovations to the first and sixth floor. If you can just share about that.
Sure.
We went right to the word
If
chart.
you've been to our customer service center, it is tired. Also, I think that we could utilize some of the dead space that's in the area to make it more comfortable for customers. We want to also put in a new window so we can service customers more efficiently. Up on the 6th floor, you said the 6th floor, right?
Yes, the first and sixth floors.
6th floor.
Six.
We had made renovations. We had kind of shoehorned our billing team into one space on the 6th floor. We want to make sure that we reconfigure it. It's an open area with a lot of desks. There isn't a whole lot of privacy to be able to talk about settlements with customers and the like, so we want to make some just interior renovations to make it more, give a little more privacy to people so they could talk about customers' accounts without people overhearing everything. So.
Okay. All right. So that wraps it up for this presentation. All right, so thank you for this detailed, thorough presentation. Thank you, Director Taylor, Deputy Director McLaughlin, and Mr. Hayford OMB Fiscal and Operational Analyst, for presenting on this evening. Thank you very much. And any follow-up information that we're going to ask that you provided to Ms. Bassnight. But before we close out, I'm going to open it up to the council members to see if they have any questions before we close out. Councilmember Hackett and Councilmember Owens.
Department of Finance, I want to thank you so much for coming and presenting. It was, for me, this is my first and second and, first budget hearings and a lot of information. So I want to say thank you so much for coming. More than anything, I don't know if I have any questions, but more of comments. As we look at the budget, sometimes I guess I got to visit you guys and understand your department more to understand, because sometimes when I hear certain different things in the budget line, I'm like, we are still using these dollars that's coming from the people in our community. And sometimes I try to figure out how does it translate to our community that we stand for and we try to fight for every day. But to hear some of the upgrades that you're doing on the first and sixth floor to make it more transitional for people, and to hear the new system that you're going to have, I just also think that, even what Spadola said today, Councilman Spadola said today, and we look at the future of our city, the future of our nation, and what's going on today, do we think it's time for us to be making these investments when we don't know what the future looks like?
If I could just make two comments. One is that thank you for your comments. You might think of the Department of Finance as being just number crunchers, but we are very customer service facing. I mean, we deal with customers day in and day out, and that's really the majority of the people that work in the department, and they do a really good job. With regard to investments, it is my vision, and I think that I applaud the Carney and the new administration for saying, we need to make the investments in order to stay current and to give the customers a lot more customer service. We have to be a lot more efficient. And, we could throw a lot of money at it, but if we don't update our systems, we're just not going to, we're not going to service the customers effectively. We're not going to have the internal controls, and we're not going to be able to collect the revenue that we need as efficiently as possible, which are the three tenets of my department. So I think it's wise to make the investments. Technology is changing like crazy.
It is.
Right? Yeah. I know in these uncertain times, it may seem kind of like, well, why are you doing this when everything is kind of, we have such uncertainty? The thing I am certain is that technology is going to move faster than what we can actually put in place. So let's use it to our advantage. Let's automate. Let's get, I think that there's going to be a decent return on investment for this.
A follow-up?
Yes.
And this is another question. I've been talking to Dr. Tony Allen down at Delaware State University. I think one of the biggest things is, when our kids from Wilmington go down to Delaware State University and they graduate and they're trying to figure out so many different places to go other than come back to the city of Wilmington, we're getting ready to try to figure out a way to create career fair strictly for the city of Wilmington, and we would love for you to be a part of it.
I'd love it.
Just putting that out there, that we would love for the finance. I see you got some vacancies, and I'm just putting that out there. We need you. And the kids, we need them to come down and stay in the city of Wilmington, which ain't going to do nothing but make everything better. So,
thanks. Please encourage them to go into accounting and finance. I know it's not sexy, but it means it's a really stable income.
What I will say is, though, you look at other cities that have, I guess, different partnerships to know, like, hey, listen, if I do go in accounting, I'm possibly going to get a job coming to the city of Wilmington. So I think that pipeline is more, should be open more. So.
I welcome it. I think it's great.
Yes. Councilmember Owens.
Yes, thank you. Again, Director Taylor, it's good to talk to you yet again. I had a few follow-up questions. You talked about almost 40,000 bills are sent out per month for water billing, correct?
Correct.
Which means almost 80,000 transitions your department's handling if everyone's paid on time, right?
Correct. Not all 40,000 get paid, back to us. I think the ratio is like 40,000 bills go out, we get approximately 28,000 back.
Okay. And then you also stated that as the city, we're taking on the monthly credit card payments for each one of those transactions. That is at 3.5%, correct?
I haven't looked at the recent credit card transaction percentages. They range somewhere between 2.5% and 3.5%, depending on what credit card you use.
Okay.
In some cases, when we first came in, there was one credit card company that we were using, or an online payment system that was charging $7.50 per transaction. We just said, no one's going to pay their bill if 15% of it's going to credit card company. So,
Got you. I do know the city used to do the quarterly charging. Would that save us money if we switched back to that system instead of the monthly billing?
well, it depends on where your policy lies, what your policy objective is. The purpose of going to monthly billing was actually to benefit the customer in two ways. One, it was allow the customer to take a look at their bill on a monthly basis. So if they had a leak, they could detect it earlier than in a quarter, right? And believe it or not, a running toilet, right, is one of the biggest problems in a home in terms of a water leak. And some people just discount it. But if they're watching their bill go up, a monthly bill will give them an opportunity to look at it. Number two, it allows for a customer to budget more effectively on a month-to-month basis. Instead of having to wait and say, have that dollar amount to pay a full quarterly bill, right? They can go ahead and budget it. Also, it allows them not to get behind. Because if you miss your quarterly bill, then you're not going to get another bill for another quarter, right? Then you've got a half year of payments that you would have to make. And it became onerous for people to be able to make that big chunk of payment. Hence is why I think we accumulated such a large accounts receivable. So, there was a purpose, there was a policy objective to it. From a revenue standpoint, did it create more volume? Yes. Did it create more cost? Yes. However, what it did was also bring in more cash flow on a monthly basis so the city could manage their cash flow more effectively. Instead, we would have had to wait every quarter for a chunk of money to come in, right? Mm-hmm. And your revenues would have been like this. This way, we were able to manage the bills more effectively. We can also see who's getting behind more quickly. That way, we can send out notices more effectively and have that revenue come in more effectively. This is why we were able to drive, if you really think about it, we put a lot of operational costs into it, but it's also driven down the accounts receivable from a high of 28 million to 19 million, right, over the last 10 years. Two, it's been driving that number down, but it's also meant that we can engage with the customer more frequently than just every quarter. And we've seen our fund balances stabilize. I mean, the water sewer fund, despite the fact that we're watching these increased costs, these increases in the rate structure, we still had enough in reserve to be able to make decisions not to charge 9% and only charge 6%. So we actually saved some money, kept in reserve for just these kinds of decisions.
Thank you. Councilmember Willard.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you to Director Taylor and your team for the really thorough presentation. I'm happy to see some of the impacts of some of the reforms around, parking tickets and red light tickets and booting and towing. I hear there's just a lot of financial impact for households when their car gets booted and towed, and I think it's great that you're seeing that impact? Because I know that people, who live in the 5th District, I know they're seeing that impact. People all over the city are seeing that impact in terms of their household budgets. And also just in terms of parking tickets, seeing the decline from 45,000 to 29,000. I know that I haven't gotten as many parking tickets, and I know a lot of, residents haven't gotten as many parking tickets, which I think makes people, happier. Like people, I hear from constituents that parking tickets that sometimes people see as a revenue generator just drive them crazy. So I'm happy to see the city's depending less on this as a way to generate revenue and more. Parking tickets should always be about enforcement, not generating revenue. And then I'm also really happy to see that you're going to be looking at safety as part of the red light ticket program. I mean, Wilmington does have more red light cameras per capita than like any place I could find, like more than New York, more than Philadelphia, like a lot of red light cameras per capita. So I definitely don't want to get hit by a car, during a red light, during one of those transitions. At the same time, we don't want to just have like everywhere you go. We don't want it to be about revenue generation. We want it to be about safety. So if there are intersections where it's not about safety, we shouldn't have a red light camera there. And definitely, looking at the safety data as part of that is going to be really important. And I hope you'll share that with council. I did have some questions, which was, in terms of costs, and Councilman Owens asked about the shift for water billing to monthly billing. And I know that, you talked about the policy impacts, but I also know that my water bill, I used to pay in a month, and I think a lot of other people are like this too. I used to pay in a quarter what now my household's paying a month. So even though it just hasn't really helped because the bills have gone up so much. And it seems like there's a little bit of a snowball effect with the billing, with the operations where, you go to quarterly billing and then it costs more to do the quarterly billing. So then the bills go up. And that snowballing effect, I think people really want us to be careful of it, that we're not paying, that we're not asking, we're asking for a 6.5% increase to the water rate. And I just think we have to be really careful about that. And one of the places I was looking at, just in terms of council's oversight of the budget process, is that the water sewer fund total of the finance department has gone from 6 million to like 9.6 million since 2022, which to me, 2022 is like yesterday. So that's like 3 million, a little bit more than 3 million change, or 50% increase since 2022 for the water sewer fund. And then the general fund, it hasn't gone up like nearly as much. Like it's gone up just 18% overall. So I just wonder, like, why is the water sewer fund finance charges increase so much faster than the general fund finance? Especially when you pointed out the finance department does so much for like the whole city.
Well, part of that is, a large part of that is attributable to the indirect cost increase that had occurred in FY26. If you do the comparison between 22 and 26, I did a comparison and I found that we had a number of increases. We had consultants, right? The consultants were helping us with more collections, because in FY22, we still hadn't made a dent in terms of our accounts receivable. We were sitting on a huge amount of money that was sitting out there that was to be collected. Number two, the indirect costs line, it went up $874,000 this year alone, right? And I think the overall cost for that was almost $1.2 million since FY22. So what they're finding is that this is because of the number of transactions that come through the Department of Finance, it's a personnel intensive, it's a very customer service focus intensive. quarterly billing, you didn't have this kind of volume. We now have that volume. But we also have the benefit of that volume in terms of better cash flow coming in, people paying their bills on time, and the reduction of the accounts receivable. So you have to look at it in a larger context. Yes. On its face, did we increase? Yes. However, that also resulted in more revenue coming into the system, having a water sewer fund that over the last 7 years has been sustainable. Prior to 10 years ago, general fund was making a direct contribution to the water sewer fund. Now it stands on its own, and it's because of better billing, staying on top of your collections and the like. Now, I don't like to go to collections as much as anybody else, but it's all part of the operating. It's our operational activity. This is what the Department of Finance does. 311 was added to our budget as a result. We've also seen that has been a factor that's increased it. So we're watching, again, the consulting fees, the 311 fees, the billing. All of that has contributed to the increase. Can I say that, let's take a look at FY27 as we get through a new billing system. Maybe we can automate, maybe we can look at, kind of flattening the costs. My intention is not to grow a department. In fact, I think that we could be doing more with what we have if we were making the investments. And I encourage you to make these investments under the CIP so we can have a better billing system. But hopefully those costs won't continue to escalate. Again, it's all part of the cost of operating a system.
Madam Chair, can I ask one more question?
So I just want to also mention that the addendum questions are in the folder here, and so I just wanted to make sure that you saw that in the folder.
Yes.
Yeah, the questions in the folder, essentially, in answer to the question,
Yes.
direct question, is that it's all volume. It's, it's 800,000 bills and all the relationships of those bills to the general fund side where we have property taxes, only about 28,000 property tax bills that go out once a year. And then wage tax that comes in from 25 major employers. Most of that comes in. It comes in quarterly, but it's done in bulk. You don't have the customer-intensive aspects in those areas as you do in the water sewer fund.
All right. I need to go to Councilmember Cabrera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director, and the staff from the Finance Department for an excellent presentation. I have to say I learned a lot more than I've had in previous years. You guys did such a detailed presentation. I really appreciate that. So I have two questions. One, we know that we lowered, well, we didn't lower it. What we did was we gave people more time to pay their parking tickets. So now they would have an extended period of time to go at least 2 weeks before the instead of charging $40, they would get a break and they would pay $25 if they paid within 2 weeks, giving people at least a paycheck to be able to do that. So that way the fines don't increase. I know there was some concerns when we first talked about lowering the parking fines to $25 about revenue going down. We argued, you and I, that we probably would have more compliance. And you did point out that it was only a difference of, $10 if we're really looking at the discount we were giving before, or $5, something like that. Have you seen, and I know we just did this, it went into effect July 1st, have you seen either more compliance, people following up and paying because it's $25 and paying within those 2 weeks? Have we lost revenue in terms of ticketing because of that? or would you say that there's more compliance even if it's revenue neutral? Because we're not, like you said, we're not trying to make money and try to run the city off of fines and fees, but we do want people to be compliant. So is there anything around that that you can give us, or do we have to wait another full year before we can really get a feel of that?
I don't think we need to wait that long. The problem is I don't have the statistic at my fingertips. We have what we call an aging report. And what it is, it shows you the difference between what's been issued and what's been paid, right? So we know that tickets are down, right? So what I need to do is look at the difference in the aging. Has the aging, are people paying later? Or are they forgetting because they've got the 2 weeks to go ahead and pay? So I apologize, I don't have an answer off the top of my head, but I can show you the aging report, some aging stats. I can have that generated and provided to Marshall for distribution this week.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. And my second question, if I may continue, Madam Chair, is in terms of the revision of the fees that we did to update them, because it's been over 35 years where some of these fees have not been updated. Do you see a difference in that? Do we have more revenue coming in, less revenue coming in? How is that working for the city?
Are you referencing the business license fees that we were?
The business license fees, which included the rental registration fees.
Actually, we've seen a pretty substantial increase as a result of those fees going up. Keep in mind that on the rental licenses, we capped for-profits and nonprofits this year. I don't think that has demonstrably changed the numbers, but I know that we are up substantially. I don't know if I don't have a number. Maybe Rob? No, I don't have that revenue. Okay, we can get that number. But I think that we've definitely seen an increase in the amount of revenues come up.
Okay, great. Those are the two things. If you could follow up and let me know, just how things are looking. And then I will have to propose maybe lowering something with the rental registration. So we'll talk about that later.
Okay, there was 2 other council members on the line first. Council Member Johnson and Bracy.
Hi, Director. I appreciate you giving this clear presentation. I always appreciate the work your team's doing. Wanted to just focus on being efficient. And I know a lot of you talked about kind of labor shortages and the obstacles that your departments face. So it's kind of a 2-part question. It's has the city finance department looked into open AI models in which other government bodies are looking at in terms of trying to become more efficient? And if not, is the city open to exploring more of an app-based 311 model and also AI? As I see it, that's kind of the wave of the future. I know a lot of cities are looking at that in order to reduce labor costs, but also increase the amount they're able to bring back in.
Council member, thank you for the question. I think that's better reference to the IT department. The IT department, however, has given us some training and some overview of ChatGPT, some of the OpenAI utilization. I use it in my course of my day when I need to research what's going on in another jurisdiction or something, and it really is a great, very helpful tool. I will tell you that as we build our ERP system, and as we're building our Enquesta billing system, they have some AI built into the technology. I think we're going to see probably more of that in the ERP system than we are in the billing system. The billing system still was built on probably an older generation of an Oracle platform, but there are opportunities. Now, I will caution you that this is kind of still the Wild West. There are so many companies out there doing AI and pitching it as AI when it is just a much more complex search engine. If we start talking about it being, intelligence generation, then generative AI, that may be something that we need to really be careful and pick wisely. This stuff is changing really, really fast. I think that you're going to see it built more into systems that you will get from vendors as opposed to us acquiring an open AI system and trying to build something ourselves. But I think that there is a role for it.
And then just lastly, if I may, Chairwoman,
Yes.
regarding app-based technology, which is more, I guess you would call older school technology, is there a push to platform 311 collections on a app-based forum, or is that question better for IT? Because it's something I know I've asked previously. If you go 2 or 3 years ago in budget hearings, and it's something that I think I still hear from residents throughout the city. It's people want an app, be able to pay bills. People want an app to be able to get a license.
I'll hand that over to the mayor's office, but I have been pitched that very thing.
Okay.
So there is a cost associated with any new development. With the new administration coming in, we are definitely considering a number of changes and upgrades to 311. That is definitely something we can include as part of that discussion, but it will definitely be cost dependent. The app price that I got 2 or 3 years ago when I was running 311 was around $298,000 for an app. I don't think it would cost that much now. But we certainly wouldn't be implementing anything with a price tag that high, I think, especially when we already have a web-friendly portal on our website, mobile-friendly portal that you can use to upload pictures and anything else and submit cases. But it is definitely something that we will be considering over the next year.
I will follow up with you, Ms. Mergler, and also Director Taylor. It's something it's a kind of a, I think it's to put us on the cutting edge of the cities in this area. I think it's going to be necessary for us to at least look at how we can integrate the app-based functionality with AI. So I'll follow up offline.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. We got about 6 minutes left. I really need to go to the public first to see if we have anyone from the public that have any comments on the line. We don't have anyone in the chambers. Okay, I am going to Councilmember Owens and then Will.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions. So just real quick, just for knowledge for myself and also for the community, if a company qualifies for the tax abatement program, do they also still have to pay the rental registration fees for their units in, let's say if they're doing like apartment building?
Yes.
Okay, so someone, let's say in theory, there could be someone who qualifies for a 10 or a 5-year, 15-year tax abatement program and not have to pay taxes that way. And then because of a rental unit cap that was put on with the additional fees, we're leaving money on the table because they're not paying those fees to the city as well, correct?
Well, they're paying up to the cap.
Correct.
Again, that's a legislatively mandated policy. So, when we had originally proposed the increases to the rental licenses, for-profit companies had no cap.
They had no cap before, correct? And with that, you saw individuals, especially these companies, paying full for each unit, correct?
Well, yes and no. We still have some arrears, but we're working with those companies to get that money paid in terms of the rental licenses. Mm-hmm. But most of them, it affects a very, very, very small subset. You'd have to have very, very large apartment buildings in order for you to get to that $5,000 threshold or above. Mm-hmm. So we had a very, very small subset. We're still working out how to get some of that repaid back. However, the cap, I think the cap, the cap did put a reduction in the amount of revenue that we could potentially have gotten as a result.
Thank you for that, and that was my main point, right? Like Councilman Hackett and Councilman Spadola both stated earlier, in these unforeseen times that we may be going into, with multiple projections of a potential recession, I think right now we need to be fiscally responsible and make sure that there's equity in our collection, right? Which means everyone who can pay should be paying, and that goes to some of the largest benefactors of our tax abatement program, right? If they have the ability to at least pay for their rental units, like a small mom and pop landlord has to right now, I think it's only fair as a city that we're trying to collect on these dollars, but we make sure we do it from everyone in an equitable way. People who are benefiting from not paying from that, again, we cannot just sit back and continue to allow that to happen in this city. And it shouldn't matter if, how much money that they want to give to different campaigns. This is about the finances of the city of Wilmington. So I think we have to be better stewards and make sure that we're collecting on those funds. I think, as you stated, a cap has reduced the amount of money that potentially can come into the city, and I think we should probably get rid of that cap. Thank you.
Council Member Willard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess I wanted to underline that the reason why I've been paying so much attention to, the indirect costs that are paid for out of the water sewer fund and, the finance department charges that are put on the water sewer fund is because we have like an incredible water utility, that's delivering us all fresh water every day. And we don't want to underinvest in that infrastructure because we're taking some money to pay for city expenses that could be paid for with other things like, for example, we have this cap so that if you have a large apartment building, if you have more than 50 units, every unit over the 50 is free. And there's a possibility, or there seems to be a reality that maybe our commercial buildings have been underassessed so that, again, we're leaving money on the table in terms of revenue for the city. So I just think, we should leave no stone unturned and make sure that everybody pays their fair share. Because we have really important city services and we have really important city infrastructure, and we have to make sure that we're being responsible about that. So my question is around the indirect costs. There's $8.5 million in the indirect costs, which are, paying for city services theoretically related to delivering water sewer services, but not directly related to not directly delivering. Like all the direct delivery of water sewer services happens in the Public Works Department. And then, the Finance Department does the billing and things like that. But I didn't understand why the Finance Department, $9.6 million of your budget's paid for by the Water Sewer Fund, but $3 million of that 9.6 goes to indirect costs. And then in the Public Works Department, it's like $86 million is spent in Public Works, and they have, and 5.4 of that is indirect costs. So how does that indirect cost get allocated between the Public Works Department and the Finance Department? It just seems like $3 million is a lot of indirect costs on the Finance Department, which you could even say was already an indirect cost of delivering water sewer services.
So, Director Taylor, can we make sure that we get this information as it relates to?
Yeah, if I can, Chair, if you don't
Yes.
mind,
Mm-hmm.
thank you for bringing it up. And good question, Councilwoman Willauer. One of the reports that Ms. Mergler did share with us is the indirect costs report. I know that was the spreadsheet, but Black and Veatch is working on the final version, and they will be providing a summary of that detailed spreadsheet to do a high-level summary. And also, when Black and Veatch present for Public Works, they're going to go into more detail as far as how those calculations was done, and that will answer a majority of your questions.
And I recall the email. That's where I was going. The email that was asked for the final report from the study. So that's basically what I wanted to bring up, the final report that Ms. Bass and I just shared.
Yeah, Madam
Okay.
Chair, could I ask a question for clarification?
Go ahead, sure.
So I got the report. That's why I'm asking my question.
That's
I
not
mean,
the
my
final-
question was just like, how did the allocations happen? That I saw the report. I just didn't understand that, like, how the allocations happened. That was just my question.
And
Okay.
I think that I had just shared that when Ms. Mergler shared the report, that it wasn't the final report, that Black and Veatch supposed to provide like a final report and summarize what that information means. So what we gave to you was a very preliminary report based upon how they sat down with each department to be able to determine that information, but it wasn't final. Is that correct, Ms. Mergler?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So the final report is forthcoming, and Black and Veatch will be doing a detailed report or a presentation to council on the 30th. They are best equipped to answer these questions.
Thank you very much, Madam
You're
Chair.
welcome. Councilmember Hackett?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I want to be quick. I think Councilman Johnson stated just, our state of city involved in AI and possibly an app. I just want to back up everything he said. I talked to the Deputy Chief of Staff about an app for our city, and, I think it's definitely needed when we're talking about where our people are at today. We're always on our phone. I'm pretty sure our app would be way more, to me, way more friendly. I don't even visit websites these days, depending on how friendly it is or not. I would love to see us have something that the city of Wilmington can own for our people. They can go on the app, download, and I don't know if it could be any more friendly than that, than having something for our own people in our city. So thank you.
The new Enquesta program will have a telephone app. So you'll be able to have the portal and be able to go in through your phone.
Okay.
Plus, we will also, we can also talk about what that looks like in terms of answering questions just for the general public. But
All right, thank you. Councilmember Bracy, your hand was up and then it was put down. Did you want to say anything before we close out?
No, ma'am. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right. So
My hand's up.
okay, so I would like to thank
Councilwoman Cabrera is online.
excuse me?
Yeah, my hand's up,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilmember Cabrera.
Very quickly, Director, we had talked about, God, now I forgot my question. An app for online opportunities. So when people go to register their properties, meaning the landlords, one of the biggest concerns that was brought up, especially when we raised the fees, is that what are they getting in return? They need the convenience of being able to apply for their business license online versus having to go to finance and then go to another department, go downstairs, go upstairs. They feel like they have to take a whole day off just to come to renew their licenses. Is this new software or anything that we're doing going to change that? Will property owners be able to register their properties online or get their licenses online without having to come, any business, not just the rental property owners? Because that is the biggest concern that we heard when these fees were increased. Aside from the fact they hadn't been increased in 35 years, but what are they getting in return? Is there going to be an opportunity for them to be able to register online?
yes, I'm investigating software as we speak. It'll be one where you'll be able to file and then pay. In fact, I had allocated money in the CIP last time, I think it was the 24 budget, to build a system like that. We're just simply trying to roll out all this technology at once. We just have to have the bandwidth to do it. But yes, council member, FY2026, we will see a rollout of this technology.
Excellent.
Thank you. That is it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you, Director Taylor, Deputy Director McLaughlin, and Mr. Hayford, OMB Fiscal and Operational Analyst, for presenting this evening And again, for the council members or anyone in the public, if you have any other follow-up questions or information, you can reach out to Ms. Bass Knight if you need clarity on anything, or any of the council members, if we need to get clarity on anything that was discussed on tonight, we can reach out. I know for myself, Director Taylor's office and door is always open. I have a few questions myself, so I'll be setting up a meeting as it relates to a few things that was shared, Director Taylor. So again, I want to just thank everyone, all the department heads, WITN, our council staff, and members of the public. I want to announce that our next budget hearings are going to be scheduled for Wednesday, April the 9th at 4:30 p.m. Those two budget hearings are going to be the Audit Department, Public Works Department regarding the General Fund and the Motor Vehicle Fund. And I would just want to mention, in the way of announcements, to please tune into WITN Channel 22 to watch the meeting. And you can also watch online at www.witn22.org. And also, budget information is available at www.wilmdebudget.org. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So motion.
Motion to adjourn.
So motion. Motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone. Good night.